everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Stuff I Heard podcast. I'm your host, Josh Peak, and this is episode 214. I happen to have Ron White here. You want to say hi, Ron?
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
He had a mouthful of coffee. Sorry about that. And we have Danielle. Want to say hey?
Hey, Desiree.
Desiree, excuse me. We're just starting off with a bang there.
I call her Dizzy.
Dizzy?
She makes me dizzy sometimes.
Oh, okay.
She's actually...
So you were just asking me about stickers, and one of the things I was going to tell you about was I got a buddy of mine who he's got a 90s cover band called 95 down in Albany, Georgia. He's the lead singer. And weirdly enough, like they've started to become popular. So he's like, I need to make merchandise. And he made these koozies, and he's been giving them out like crazy. He goes, people love the koozies. He says, I can't even tell you, man. He goes, I bought a bunch of them, and I thought, I'll never sell these. I'm just going to give them away. So he started giving them away. He said now, you know, people that he doesn't even know comes into contact with the band will come up to him at work or whatever or in public and be like, hey, aren't you with that band? You got any more koozies? He's like, people just love the koozies. He's like,
that's neat.
It's a way for us to get our name out there and whatnot.
You know, I think when it comes to like business cards and stickers like that, one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life, small group of individuals that were smart enough out west, Lyle Tuttle, the famous tattoo artist that tattooed, what's her name, Janis Joplin, staggered into his shop. And got that little flower on her breast. His business cards, he makes himself. He bought one of those penny smashers and had a die made. Has his information on it. You put a penny in and you turn the handle, and he has a shiny coin business card.
So he casts it out and stamps it.
Yeah, just like when you go to all these different tourist places, destinations, national parks. Stuff like that. Yeah. That's a pretty cool little thing. It's a really cool thing. Keep 50 of them in your pocket easy, you know.
Well, you know, and I got a friend of mine who's also doing a podcast and a YouTube page, and he made business cards, and I was like, he's like, don't you want to make some? And I was like, no, not really. Well, why do I need a business card? I got a website. You just go to the website, and you're good from there. But it's that question of, you know, before I go to spend any money, the question is always, could I be doing something with what I have? Like, even before I bought microphones and stuff like that, I was just using my phone, and it was like, do I need the microphone? And it was like, how do I like justify the expense? And, you know, Dolores was the one, she was like, well, she goes, when you use your phone, a lot of times the sound quality could be better. And she just kept saying it could be better. So the first microphone I bought was one of those USB ones that just plugs in the side. And it was okay. But even with it, like if you bumped it, or if you know, if the wire moved at all, you'd have this awful crackling noise.
You know, or squelch can come back.
Or a
feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, and she was like, what would it take for you to improve the sound a little bit better? And that's when I first bought the first board that I had, was just two XLR cables out. And I bought two of these microphones. And I think I did it for under $100, and I was like, you know, the main thing I wanted to show other people that were thinking about starting one was that they could do it cheap. Mm-hmm. It's like you don't have to have a big studio. And that was one of the things when I started building this furniture. Like, this room was a different room. It was the exercise room for my wife, and before that it was a bedroom for one of the kids. But it was literally a thing of, I need a table. I don't have the money to buy a table, but I got this wood somehow, and let me just see if I can make a table.
Well, it sure looks nice, man.
Amazing.
I like it.
So every step of it is just, how do you do this? Like, I mean, I know you could throw money at a problem. I don't want to throw money at a problem. I want to figure out, how do you do this other way? You know, how do you do this a different way?
I was going to just suggest that maybe, you know, when people come here to podcast, man, you should give them a little chisel and a hammer, you know, and allow them to carve in some graffiti or nothing.
I thought at one time about doing like signatures, like getting like people to sign the table whenever they're guests. But I was like, I don't know, that would be weird, because after a while it'd just be full of stuff, and I kind of like the look of the table as it is.
You know what? That's something you can do on the wall.
Maybe.
Yeah, you know, so there's nothing wrong with tagging walls, man.
Maybe.
You know, a lot of memories, a lot of laughs, you know.
Yeah.
So I've been to a lot of places to do it.
Well, and that's sort of the idea of doing the website. Is I created a fans and guest page where I'm taking pictures of folks and putting them up, and that way, if anybody's got a question of, well, who was on that episode or whatever, and then they can click on it, and there's somebody either wearing merch or whatever. Like when you came in to visit last time, I think I was shooting video, and when I was running it back through the computer, I paused it and took my phone out and took a picture of it and just saved it as a screenshot, and that was what I used as the tagline picture. If anybody was like, who was with him? You know, because a lot of people hear Ron White and they think the comedian Ron White. That's the first thing that folks think of.
I've heard that, you know, but I always have to tell people, no, not tater salad.
Not tater salad.
Well, you know, I got an email from him one time, you know that.
Really?
It's like one of the coolest things I ever got during some of my past exploits. And It was when I had freedomtattoo.com, and that website, I mean, I lost the website because I just abandoned it. And the reason being, Josh, I lost that website because I just ignored it.
Yeah.
I got overwhelmed by it. And when I did a couple of television shows like Oprah and Good Morning America, the early show, when I was on those shows, man, suddenly because I wore that freedomtattoo.com t-shirt on the air, I suddenly had over 1 million hits. Mm-hmm. And it it was overwhelming. I was getting 1,000 emails every 2 days, and I was just going under with it. It was just totally overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so, but the funny thing was about it, one day I'm having to sift through there, and I see this thing that says Ron White, and I'm like, I thought it was the header, but it says it's from Ron White. And I'm like, so what's this, some kind of a hack or virus or something else? And then it says, I got it in my drawer at home somewhere. It says, in a nutshell, hey, this is Ron White. The other Ron White, tater salad. And I just want you to know that because of you, everywhere I'm going, people keep asking me, what you doing trying to legalize tattooing in South Carolina?
Yeah.
And I since heard that it actually made a couple of his, he actually mentioned it on a few of his tours, talking about having someone else come in and take his name.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny. I have a fond memory of that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Well, it's unusual that, when you're born, you think no one's got my kind of name, especially with like my name, Josh Peak. Like, I didn't know any other Peaks other than our immediate family.
Yeah, you're the only Peak I think I can ever.
And I've never come across them until the internet. Now, when the internet come out, I was like, I wonder if there are any other Peaks out there. So I did like a little research or whatever. And there's large numbers of Peaks throughout the country. There's also some famous Josh Peaks. There's actually a professional bullfighter named Josh Peak. There's a MMA fighter named Josh Peak. There's a big-time lawyer in California named Josh Peak.
That's cool.
Get out of town, for real.
I don't think it was Josh Peak that was the bullfighter.
Yeah.
But I remember in Barcelona, Spain, when I was probably about 8, 9, I saw a matador killed. And that was one of the more, I was never into bullfighting, but you go to Spain, or you're going to see it, especially back then. It was a pretty neat thing. He was wearing a really ornate yellow, almost not neon, but golden yellow and fringed suit, really classical looking with this special cap. And that bull horned him, got him right into the abdomen, and picked him up and chucked him. And I remember that he was wearing yellow, and then when I saw him on the ground, I noticed that it was no longer yellow.
Yeah.
His entire upper body, his clothing was like orange red, but I understand he didn't make it.
That's such a crazy idea that you're going to get into a bull ring. I hear that they drug the bulls too.
I don't know that they drug the bulls. I do know that they do some really horrendous things to them. I mean, to make sure, I think the bull there, somewhere in its central nervous system, right behind the shoulder or in between the shoulder blades, there's a sensitive place where they take, these guys come out in horses. And they have these long, colorful lances, and they go up next to the bulls with the horses, and they take that lance, and they stab the bull in the back of the neck, somewhere right in between the shoulder blades right there. And what that does is it cuts the muscle and causes the bull to have a difficulty to, I understand it to be, to raise its head. So, bull's coming in there and it wants to buck you.
Yeah.
And that weakens it. So by the time a matador gets out there and starts acting like he's Billy Bad Beep, he really, he's really already fighting a weakened animal that's getting crazy. Desperate.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine doing that.
There is a better bull story than that, though. It's the most precious thing I own. I own the horns from the Schlitz Malt Liquor Bull.
The Schlitz Malt Liquor?
The original Schlitz Malt Liquor Bull. There's a little known fact. There's a family that ended up living here in South Carolina out towards Sellers that their father, when I met the guys there and did some business with them for years, became good friends, the Shepherd family, their father was the tack and harness maker for Hollywood's greatest Western stars. He even did the bridles for the chariot races in the original Ben-Hur.
Wow.
All of that stuff. Incredible leather work. And so he was really good friends with, what's the name of the guy? Who's the only actor that has all 5 stars on the Walk of Fame? One for every category. There's only one of them. It's that Western actor, Gene Autry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gene Autry had his own studio city, Western Ranch, where he filmed his own shows and movies. And he had subletted or contracted out a part of that Western fake town, because you ever go out to like Studio City, they have a fake building, and the back of the building's hollow.
Yeah.
But the front of it looks like you're standing in the Old West. And so what he did was, the idea was they were going to bring the bull in there, and they were going to have it bust through the building like it did when it came through the wall.
Yeah.
So
I remember those commercials.
When they filmed that commercial, man, the most incredible thing about that commercial was a one-take commercial, buddy. One take. But the bull died first.
Really?
See, that's the catch. Is that while they were hanging out with Gene Autry, the Shepherd boys, who I became real good friends with, they used to ride around on this docile bull, really big bull, looked mean, but he would just let those 2 kids ride on him, and he'd be walking all over the ranch. And that's how they spent their time. And the studio guys are setting up, the film crews are setting up for doing this commercial.
You got to imagine if it was a beer bull, they're probably giving the bull beer all the time. Be like, come on, Bessie, let's go for a walk.
Believe it or not, there's a really funny thing to it. It's like the bull is being shipped to the site in with an 18-wheeler or something. And en route, it was late, detained, and Gene Autry was reputed to be a pretty savage drunk. When you get drunk, you get pissed off, you get real moody.
Imagine that.
So there he is on his ranch, and his ranch house is filled with memorabilia from Hollywood like you would expect from a king of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And so he's an incredible guy. He's got a lot of, probably got a lot of ego. He's probably proud of what he does. He's got a lot of authority in the subject because he's just a veteran. Everyone knows him. And there he is hanging out with his best friend, who happens to be the tack and harness guy, making all the saddles for people like John Wayne, Roy Rogers, Clint Eastwood, everyone. I mean, he was the man to go to. So what happens? The bull doesn't arrive. Gene Autry's getting drunk. He's starting to get in an ill mood. These guys have been out there all day, set up, and they're like, where the hell is this bull, is what he's thinking. So what happens? They suddenly get word the bull died in transit. So suddenly they don't have a bull. And so Larry and Edwin's father, he said, I got an idea. Don't worry about it. And so there was already a, kind of like on this table here, man, it's like this lengthwise stall right to the back of the wall. So they were going to have the bull run right through that straight course. Cameras are on the other side waiting for it to bust through. But there's no bull now. So they take this bull that they're riding, and they hooked some vicious electrodes to it in the groin. They put it in there, and he says, this will work. And he gave that thing a zap, and that bull went nuts and went straight through the wall. One take, went perfect. And it was because it got shocked pretty good. Man.
I remember the commercial as a kid because you'd see the wood splinter and like flip in slow motion. And it was like, whoa, like the Kool-Aid man busting through a wall.
Had several cameras set up, different angles there, waiting for that magic shot, and it's like, it's an incredible thing to see, but that's what happened. So later on, how they ended up in my possession, I became friends with the family as an artist, and I just had a big admiration for their father. I mean, to go into his workshop over in Sellers, some obscure little cinder block building, you wouldn't even imagine somebody of that kind of magnitude and talent living there and dying there eventually. But he says, oh, you want to see what I do? I see leather work everywhere. But I mean, this is like serious leather work. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Mm-hmm. This is like a master craftsman. And so he said, oh, go look at my photo album. There's a bunch of cool stuff. You might recognize some of it. I said, oh, really? And then when I open it up and I suddenly see, Ben-Hur's chariot race. Color photographs of the set. He had a pink bridle, a yellow bridle set for the chariot horses for that race. Every single one of them made by him. It's like, and the things he did for stars, the custom orders, the leather work, it's truly a dying craft, that kind of talent. You don't see too many people doing that. But he had another incident that he told me about, and they gave me this gift, and it was the horns that I have in my bedroom. Pretty big set of horns mounted with his custom leather work. Nicer than any I've ever seen in my life, and it's a nice thing to have. But they belong to the Schlitz Malt Liquor Bull, and the story goes that bull and so many other animals that were important to Gene Autry and had history with him, things from memorabilia from sets of movies, horses, skulls that were in movies 30 years earlier or something and had died or whatever. His house was covered with that stuff like a museum. And I mentioned that he had a drinking problem. So Gene Autry's sitting around getting drunk one time when an earthquake hit. And when that earthquake hit in the area there, it shook a large amount of memorabilia off the walls, dropping it down to the ground. He went into a drunken rage over it and ordered his ranch hands to put it in a pyre and burn it. And then he passed out as they were lighting fire to it. And it was a whole pile of Western memorabilia out of his ranch house. When he passed out, those ranch hands went in there and salvaged every single thing they could get out of there because they sure as hell weren't going to challenge him
Right.
when he was drinking like that. And so
They figure after the fact they could just tell him, yeah, it burned.
that set of horns apparently was about 6 feet longer than they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when they fell off, one of the horns on one side broke. And so old man Shepherd cut him back down to size to fit, remounted it. But it's from the same bull that filmed that commercial. So it's a pretty interesting piece of memorabilia to have.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It's the only bit of cowboy I got in me, man.
I published a short story on Gene Autry's horse, Champion, when I was in college. I had a little Gene Autry.
Really? He's a fascinating guy. Yeah. Think that kind of accomplishment. You ever been on the Walk of Fame?
Yes.
Okay, well, the Walk of Fame, other than they had to eventually, they voted Trump to be removed. So they removed his star, even though he broke records in Hollywood and deserved to have a star on the Walk of Fame.
Right.
But it was getting vandalized. People were going to it and taking sledgehammers to it, whatever they could to deface it.
Yeah.
And they were having to replace it. But right down the Walk of Fame, man, if you walk around that Walk of Fame up and down and in and out in a few places, like the main theater, which I don't think it's called the main theater anymore. They changed it. Where R2 and C-3PO and
Yeah, I think because Brandy and Alex went out there, I want to say maybe last year, and they were saying that it has a new name now. It got bought out by some corporate company.
I almost went to jail there last time I went with my family, Josh.
You could have almost any story and go, I almost went to jail then, and I go, I believe that.
Well, it's my sense of humor, man. I don't know what's wrong. I don't. It's like I feel like I'm just like going crazy thinking about, but everything we're talking about from the Walk of Fame to everything, it's just got so many stories for me. Right there in the Walk of Fame now, right down from the old main theater on the corner, prominently on Hollywood Boulevard, there is the Church of Scientology.
Oh boy!
And I think they're a bunch of weirdos, It's like they levitate, Tom Cruise, levitate bouncing on a sofa.
The funny part is I heard a comedian talk about it.
For a long time. Scientology.
Wait, what?
My dad was into Scientology. He actually was at the little place in California, the first one that opened.
I hope her dad doesn't listen to your show. And he's going to find
doesn't
out
matter.
that, and he's going to realize that I said, he's really eccentric, weird.
Enough, so that won't be anything.
No. You can out him totally here. Nobody listens to this.
Actually, my dad probably will.
The internet's not,
He's going to.
Yeah,
the internet's not forever.
You would probably really enjoy having him on the show, actually. The guy worked for NASA.
Oh, my dad's
He's
really
very, very brilliant. He's
Hey, anybody's
very
invited.
intelligent. And on top of that, he's a screaming liberal.
Yeah.
And so when you put that genius liberal thing together, you have something which would definitely make the ratings here shock some conservatives.
Yeah.
He looks like Santa Claus, too. So.
But I got to tell you this, man. How do I almost go to jail? It's Christmas time. And I'm walking with my daughter and Kelly. We're walking on Hollywood Boulevard, and we hear this really weird Christmas music, Josh. It's like the everyday Santa Claus kind of stuff you would hear if you're going to wait in line to sit on Santa's lap. And right next to the Church of Scientology is this little tiny lot fenced off, open gate towards the Walk of Fame. And there's all this Christmas Land Wonder stuff in there to attract kids. And they're playing Christmas music, but it sounds like it's coming through an echo chamber. It's all warped, like sci-fi mixed into it. It's like listening to the Misfits in elevator music. It's just out of, it's out of place, you know.
Which timely is really actually something that could happen nowadays.
Well, they actually have an album that they did like that.
Oh yeah,
a bunch of Misfits.
Big money to be made in that.
So I'm listening to this demented Christmas music, and it just sounds weird, like it's going to be a horror movie. Like someone's going to go there, sit on Santa's lap, and die. That kind of a weird music. And so my daughters automatically gravitated towards it. Kelly goes with her, and there I am standing in front of this beautiful glass, shiny Church of Scientology right on the corner. And so I see this guy in a suit, reminded me of that guy from the movie Beverly Hills Cop, where the guy said, "Would you like cappuccino, lemon twist?"
Oh, that, yeah.
You remember that kind of it had that kind of look.
Bronson Pinchot, where he was.
Yeah, you know. So I was gravitating towards that, man. And so, you know, being that it's the Church of Scientology, and I think of, wow, you know, so it's like everyone who's cool is a Scientologist, you know, and I'm being very sarcastic.
Okay.
But I walk.
I was going to say, it depends on your level of cool, but all right.
So what gets me landed, having to run from the police? I couldn't resist. I walked in there, guys, can I help you? I said, yeah, I'm here for my appointment with John for his massage. Who? I said, okay, come on, man, do I have to? When he realized I'm talking about one of their highest ranking members and was supposed to massage his I don't know, internals.
Prostate?
Yeah, pretty much.
Goodness.
But I played it out like that. I basically was going to do a rectal massage on him. You know, it's like the guy didn't like it. He didn't like it too much, and he got on the phone and he said, "Hurry! There's another one here."
Another one. Oh boy!
So I made it about a block with the family down the
I don't
street.
want to be another one. I want to be the one. Why I gotta be lumped in? Come on, guys, be original. Yeah.
Well, it was pretty fun going in there. You know, it's like, who would think of that?
There's a funny story I heard. Bert Kreischer is a comedian. He had a neighbor who was a Scientologist, and Bert was raised Catholic, and he was like, he's hanging out with this guy one night, and he's like, he says, you know, I'm a pretty gullible guy. He goes, but I got to tell you, he goes, Scientology is just crazy to me. And his neighbor, he said, he's a nice guy and all. He goes, but he tells me, he goes, what's easier to believe, that there's aliens possible, or that your God, you know, died and 3 days later rose from the grave? And he goes, all right, listen, don't talk me into it because I'm real close to it. He goes, I believe what I believe. You believe what you believe. Whatever,
But
man.
you know what? It's funny you bring it up, man. But, you know, I'll have a comment to make about that too. And I don't know, you know, I know that my girlfriend, she believes in God too. Both of us were raised Catholic, you know, and no, we do not worship the Virgin Mary. Just so anyone out there in the viewing or listening audience thinks that, you know, she is not God. She's just the mother, the woman that God chose to give birth to the Savior. That's a pretty important woman that he chose for her virtue. So we pray to her, not as a God, but for her to have mercy and pray for us.
Yeah, to intercede
to beg
for us
to be forgiven to her master, God. You know, so it's a different thing like that. But regardless with Catholicism, it's an ancient Orthodox church. And, you know, the funny, it's just, you talk about the religion, things like that. I have found an incredible amount of strain religiously. Catholic here in the South is different, man. It's like, it's unbelievable. You get hammered for it, being religious. But when you're talking about the alien thing, not to get too distracted, I think that mankind makes a really big mistake. First of all, we have no idea of time perception. If there's a thing that we're going to believe in, such as God, we're talking about the earth, the world being created. The world being created in 6 days, seventh day rest.
It's our perception that we distort.
What is eternity? I mean, it's like doing, not to bring in any illegal activity, but you know what eternity is? The closest thing I've been able to ever find it in my pathetic life was 5 minutes on LSD.
Yeah.
You think you're in eternity, but it's like, that's pretty much it, man. But what I'm saying is a point.
Well, it's like the idea of holding $100 in your hand and then telling somebody there's something called $1 trillion, and you're going, that's not real.
Right. Yeah.
How's that even a thing I can conceive?
Well, it's like we complicate it, and with the interesting thing there with the Catholic Church did an interesting thing not too long ago. I don't remember how many years ago, because my mom and I have debated about the thing there, because though I believe in God and for the most part consider myself to be in line with Catholic doctrine about how they see theology around religion, I have sometimes just questions. Yeah. And one of them is that, it's like, when we look at, I told you the joke outside the other day, so I don't know if they would appreciate it, but it's a pretty good joke. You should tell it sometime. But underlying that line's a joke I was telling about, who goes to heaven, one can't help but wonder, because you're Jewish.
What if you're born in some country that doesn't even realize civilization is real? Well, what if you never get introduced to anything outside of your village?
In that case, I think the theology turns into it's better for you to be ice cold than it is for you to be lukewarm. Because if you're lukewarm, I will spit you out.
Always the problem I have is whenever someone brings up their version of religion they follow, and they say, if you don't follow mine, you're going to heaven. It's like, whoa. Just because you have a different version,
going to heaven
or going to hell.
If
you have a different version, like everyone takes what they think is their own religion, and then they skew it to say, if you don't follow mine, then you're going down the wrong path.
It's an interesting.
Everybody has their own version of that, and it's.
I definitely don't want to make it a religious argument. I know exactly what you said, but
I want to be more of the acceptance of. I think that the Tower of Babel is supposed to be the big story. We're supposed to realize where man decided that they were more important than everything else, and at a certain point, God said, "All right, that's it. I'm gonna break you guys up. You can't speak the same language. You're gonna follow different paths." But what if our journey from that point on is to realize how we're supposed to come back around to that point where we go, "Oh, well, none of this really matters. All this is silly." I mean, we're supposed to at some point all accept the fact that we're made from the same cloth and the same, being in the same.
If we're all the same creator, if God created the beautiful world that He did with all of its variety, I guess it goes back to the original point I was making. I believe in ETs.
Me too.
Very much so.
Yeah.
My family's had a few encounters in our travels. We were able to capture one of them on photograph at sea.
I saw it. It's on Instagram.
It's like
on Instagram. Go to Ron Freakin White. You're going to see the photo from the ship.
It was nothing made by man. Now it's 200 miles or so off the coast of Africa on a transatlantic crossing when we were sailing into a storm, and it was if you look at the waves, the top of the sea there, you'll see it starting to get into gale force wind, 35, 45 knots. You start getting a froth on the top of the water. And Escapade was a big sailboat, so she's under full sail, a storm rig going in fast. But you could see the weather ahead of us turning. The ceiling's low, it's getting dark gray. When suddenly this bright, shining object that was reflecting, because we still had a little peak of sun behind us. And if you look at that photograph, that was the amazing thing about it, is it caught our eye. You see the chrome on the winches, with big winches, Barlow winches for, 25,000 pounds of pull, and stuff like that, And you could still see the chrome shining in the sun from behind us. And then suddenly something catches your peripheral vision, and there's this ball underneath the ceiling of clouds. So you're talking about an altitude, I would have to say, is probably about a couple of 100 yards, maybe. Mm-hmm. And there's rain starting to dump in the distance. The storm is coming to us. And this object goes from one side of the boat, a quarter mile away maybe, and in 3 seconds moves straight to the opposite quarter of the vessel and stops.
And hovers.
Yeah. My dad runs downstairs. What the heck is that? Well, he didn't say it that nice. He cursed like a sailor. But the thing is, he runs downstairs to get the Canon AE1, take a picture. He was able to get up in time to snap that shot, but by the time he did that, the thing had already crossed over and crossed back over, and it was obvious it was checking us out.
Yeah, it's curious.
And then straight up.
Yeah.
Gone.
one of my favorite lines of a movie ever is from the movie Contact, where the main character Jodie Foster is talking about her dad as a kid.
Yeah.
He's pointing out the stars, and he says, just imagine all those stars out there. If there's no other life than us, what a waste of space. It's a good point.
Totally
Right.
agree.
And as we were talking about the religious thing there, when you're talking about does it work with religious beliefs, everything works with Christian religious beliefs. I think it's man's ridiculous nature to try and complicate and take a thing like science and say, what about the dinosaurs? You're talking about the Earth being around this way, the history that is written in biblical terms, and what's shown in Genesis and the creation of the world, everything like this. I think that we're using a tiny little piece of our brain.
Oh, yeah.
Most people in the
Absolutely.
world, I think, are using a fraction of what most people use.
Yeah.
And so, if you think of that, then where exactly does it fall into play that what we see as reality and what we call time, none of it makes sense. God, a blink of the eye for him is what? How many millennia for us? We couldn't even conceive what an eternity is.
Well, and my question is always, what existed before our perception of life?
Well,
because
we have the heavens, right?
We're finding these geographical things all over the globe, these ancient findings, these monoliths that are buried underground that are made in ways that couldn't be made with the tools they conceivably had at the time.
Big thing I love.
And it's like, okay, so how did that happen? And one of my favorite books is, Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods, and he talks about the fact that we've had, cataclysmic events where meteors have struck our polar ice caps and flooded our planet multiple times. He's like, we can actually record up to 6 times that have happened in the last 250,000 years.
Yeah, I've been to Meteor Crater in out west.
He talks about these giant monolithic rocks that have moved from where they were originally at further away, and because of their size and placement, the only way it could have been moved is through the encapsulation of ice and water moving it.
Well, that's
because it would have floated.
Force.
Right. But he's like, that's the only way it could have been done. He goes, and we actually have a record of the last flood that happened, which is the book of Noah, the story of Noah with the ark. And he's like, that's actually recorded all over the planet from different religions and different races.
It is.
And that global flooding was real. And he goes, but what's to say that was the only one that happened? He goes, we can find from studying things in our ice caps that it's actually happened 6 times as far as we can tell so far before that. And he's like, what life existed before that? Before life was extinguished and moved on.
We seem to have, it's like the science. Like when you look at Egyptology, Egyptology for me, I would sit there and write it all off as one of the biggest con lies ever designed, so that a specific group of people from a region can try and make more claim to an incredible historical architecture and accomplishment, which they really can't even show evidence that they had anything to do with. You go to the museum at Cairo and they got 3 copper chisels. You're going to tell me that they used cubits?
Well, not only that, but think about how long ago it was built, and yet it's still withstanding today.
Yes, but there are big discrepancies.
Crazy.
Big discrepancies. I recommend to everyone, if you have the opportunity to do it and you really want to open your mind to some alternate look, because scientists are starting to step back from traditional Egyptology, and they're looking at the ancient constructs with a different question. And the question is rather, okay, we're not sure how they made these things. They've got theories. No one's been able to do it. But rather, they're asking a more important question. With this kind of a giant force of labor required to work in shifts around the clock, using tools to shape, move, and fit stones which were laid so that they are a perfectly earthquake-proof structure.
Time-proof.
Time-proof.
Wind-proof.
Earthquake-proof.
Rain-proof.
Well, tell that to the Sphinx. Now, the Sphinx
that was ego.
Yeah, but the Egyptology has done its part. Egypt, the Department of Archaeology there, has done its part to hide the truth about the Sphinx. And the Sphinx is from a much older period.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things he talks about is studying the rain effects of the structure underneath and how it actually existed 12,000 years before they believed it ever did
Absolutely,
before.
When the constellation of Leo rose over the horizon, and in all likelihood, the Sphinx was actually a giant lion, even with the lion's head, swallowed by sand dunes that came after the jungles went away.
Yeah, because it used to be a rainforest.
Yeah, it's like they had
That's
that
crazy.
It's really
Yeah.
crazy. Now, there's a really interesting question to come up with that, though, because like scientists are wanting to ask, wait a minute, how do you get these cuts into stone, like the chamber inside the Great Pyramid, which is out of the hardest stone in existence, I think, and it's cut to a tolerance where they can't put a laser in between two pieces when they're putting an actual straight architectural tool to show tolerance, and you can't get a laser light to fit between that and the cut. Now, wait a minute. Hand tools, a chisel.
They're also having trouble with tools getting through it.
Yeah, they're having a hard time today.
Yeah.
You know, no firm would want to have to do that today. But I guess the point there is, the question becomes, where are the machines, rather, that made the tools? Mm-hmm. Where are these? You have giant encampments of men. Everything disappears.
See, I have a theory.
Gone.
I know this is all bullshit and bro science, but this is my theory. So
you said a 4-letter word, man.
Well, how about that?
They're not gonna get you on
Word. Word.
That's
a 4-letter word. 4 is a 4-letter word. So like our life right now is in our lifetime, we've had pen to paper, writing down facts. We've then gone to a computer where we have it on a computer screen. Now it's getting more and more into everything is digital. There's nothing really hard copy, nothing really tangible, so that everything that we produce is more digitalized. And that's only going to progress as we go on. Yeah. I mean, our history is being recorded digitally. We're able to read textbooks on our computers.
But there seems to be a reset.
They're also like changing history. They're going back and finding old textbooks that kids are reading in school and going, we don't like this language, we're going to change it. We don't like this story, we're going to change it. So if everything is moved towards a digital platform, and let's say we have another cataclysmic event where a meteor strikes a polarized gap and it melts and it floods the earth, what's going to be left except for the tangible things? Stone. What stone things have we created that's actually going to stand that much force from not only the flooding, but the flooding moving everything back and forth and crushing everything, as we saw in India with the flooding there?
The answer is pretty much nothing.
Nothing.
It's like man-made stuff that we're doing now. I mean,
maybe Mount Rushmore.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, something like that.
Maybe Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse is a giant monolithic structure that's way above.
Now, for some reason, the petroglyphs and even pottery. You can go and find pottery that's been sitting in place, stationary, for 5,000 years, exposed to the sun. Mm-hmm. Still sitting there, much of it broken and shattered. Tourists come and steal it. I would be scared to do so, because when you come across a Native American site like that, which is intact, my daughter and I have found a kitchen. Like, a beautiful grinding stone. You see the ones you find here, they have them in South Carolina occasionally at some of the state parks.
The grit stones.
Yes. I was like, well, you got ones over there which were like, obviously a cafeteria service, because they having like 10 slots in one stone.
Yeah.
And all the stones sitting in place. And a cliff collapsed over it. And my daughter saw that cliff and said, it looks like a slide. Can I slide on it? I said, okay. I went and looked for rattlesnakes. She went up it, slid down it. But when I looked underneath it, a small encampment. Unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Undisturbed. It's like you see things like that, and that kind of stuff's going to stick around. But,
all this crap here, this is all going to
it's like, well, this is going to
demolish
disappear,
or go away.
Probably when humans are fairy
There'll be
tales.
another reboot of human life, and they'll be like,
humans might become.
They'll be like, well, the Earth's only 6,000 years old. I don't know what these dinosaurs are. We don't really call them dinosaurs.
I'll agree with that. When humans are fairy tales told by rabbits around campfires,
our perception is very limited.
It is.
It's very limited.
The point that I'm making with that is that we have. They see around the world. I was mentioning earlier to anyone listening, if you're into the subject like that, there's a incredible documentary, one of the most informative things I've ever seen on ancient constructs around the world and how they're related and their mathematical knowledge about things which were way ahead of what they thought people understood about mathematics.
Like the Aztecs and the Mayans, way before the Greeks had invented the level of math they had.
The Egyptians,
they were designing things using that math.
Knew what the meter was.
Yeah.
The Egyptians knew what the meter was.
And they shouldn't
The problem with that is the meter doesn't come around till much later.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, it revolves around the some people call it the God number. Mm-hmm. There's like an equation which is like the Nautilus shell. You look at a square grid. Mm-hmm. When you make that square, and you make a couple of lines, you plot a circle into that, and then when you make a spiral around the intersection of those lines, you come out with that Nautilus spiral, which happens to coincide with pretty much everything in life as it unfolds from a seed.
Like the Fibonacci sequence.
Petals, everything.
That's this.
And yes, and it's incredible because and that's why a lot of scientists, I guess, come into intelligent design.
Honeybee designs and
they realize that
sunflower seeds and
this isn't
shells.
by accident.
Yeah.
Something happened here.
There's a natural
the thing
design.
About ancient cultures, man, is this program, and it's a really good documentary. It's about the pyramids. It's I'm gonna think of it here. It's like the mysteries of the pyramids. It's a hour and 55 minutes long. It is easy to find if you look up pyramid documentary, and it's narrated by a female who interviews architects and archaeologists and mathematicians from all over the world who have devoted their lives for years trying to figure out what's going on. And what they've discovered is that there's a coalition in different cultures around the world to the year 10,500 BC. Now, it's like the Sphinx goes back to that year, but so do other sites in the world.
Yeah.
And the pyramids of Giza, for them to have the knowledge, they knew that the Earth was a sphere, and the pyramid happens to be, if you put two of them on top, butt to butt on each other, now you have the perfect diameter of the Earth touching all.
Well, one of the things I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about is that the Earth is actually egg-shaped, and that the actual poles don't stay in one place. They actually wobble. The Earth actually wobbles a little bit. So your polar ice caps shift and move. He said
I'm kind of closed-minded about things like that because I think about these photographs they take from orbit.
Yeah.
And I go like, it's maybe things are possible.
Well, and one of the things that we perceived, like when we were in school, we were taught, you have the diagram or the what do you call it, mobile of the Earth and the sun, and everything spins this way. And he goes, and that's what we believed for a long time, is that's how it just floated out there in space. He goes, and then we started studying things like asteroids and going, God, are these things just whipping around? And then we realized, no, wait, we're part of a bigger thing. We're part of the Milky Way galaxy. Well, as the Milky Way galaxy, our sun is not sitting still. It's actually flying through space.
It's revolving
around
giant
the Milky Way galaxy.
Kaleidoscopic
He
mass.
said it's actually the asteroids that are sitting still. We're just whipping past it so fast that it looks like they're every once in a while coming into our system.
Is that really so? I mean, it's like I know that kind of contradicts one thing that I just recently heard. I know that there's have you heard anything about the mission that's supposed to save Earth here? They do know that there's supposed to be a strike. They have the closest meteor or asteroid trajectory intersect from a body.
I've seen several claims of what they think is, like this is going to come within 250,000 feet of us, and it's like,
it's going to be very serious. Apparently, NASA already has the mission perimeters and is already planning on. They already have a game plan for it. And what's supposed to be happening is that this foreign object, this heavenly object, is on some type of orbit, which takes its trajectory way out into the universe, bringing it back to us on a rare basis. But this time, as the Earth is rotating around the sun, it's going to bring it closer to our planet, or maybe a neighboring planet, to a possible collision or gravitational influence that could be catastrophic for us.
It's amazing how many
they're going to launch a interception to this body, and they're going to land on it and thrust against it with enough power to try and change that trajectory away from its flight path by a minuscule few degrees, whatever necessary, to take it away from that threat to us. That's what I've understood about it.
It's sort of also the same idea of playing pool and hitting the breakup of the balls in the beginning and going, we'll see what happens. That's kind of what you're doing.
Yeah. And so, but the fascinating thing there is, like, man had the ability to predict the heavenly bodies. The Mayans were using it to cut out people's hearts and control the masses.
Well, we were discussing, early civilizations or whatever. I heard a podcast with this guy, Graham Hancock. Again, he wrote about they've discovered a ancient civilization in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. It was inside of a mountain in Turkey, and when they found it, they started doing testing on some of the structures that they were unearthing, and they discovered that this was a very civilized, advanced technology group who lived like 12,000 years before they ever believed life existed on Earth. And with that, they have actual drawings and pictographs of a cataclysmic event that they predicted was going to happen. They knew about it ahead of time enough that they barricaded half of their civilization inside of this mountain. It was barricaded on both sides of this structure that was built inside of a mountain to try and preserve life as much as possible. So they knew about it enough time that they could dig out an existence underneath, inside this mountain, and then barricade from both sides of it the life that was supposed to remain on the inside. And they had to have people volunteer to go, I'm going to stay on the outside and make sure you guys are barricaded in.
It almost sounds like Peter Sellers in Dr. Strangelove.
It's so wild. It's so wild that you would have that kind of idea. But the crazy part is there's actual pictograms of flying craft in their pictograms. And you're going, wait, how in the world is this existing? But that's why I think about the idea of how many times have we reset and we just don't know it?
Well, the reset seems to be like maybe... Well, I'd have to look and remind myself, look it up, but I mean, it's like apparently the Earth goes through a magnetic polarity reset that happens every 15,000 years or something. Or it's like we're 30,000. I'm not exactly sure the date, but I've read a little bit about it. And when that happens, we're going to have an issue because the actual poles flip.
Well, that's what I was saying when he was saying that the poles like wobble. He was saying that they can record where at one time the North Pole was over Russia. That was their latest discovery.
And it is the Russian model, which totally goes against any claim of this mass hysteria of climate change. Because the Russians have used that model where they show how the Earth moved, and they're able on a computer to go way back, way back, way back, and you can actually see where certain celestial bodies showed up over the horizon at certain times, and what dominant mass constellation shows up every millennia or something in swaps. You see, I think it's I'm learning a little bit every day, but I suck with the name sometimes. But they were just talking about this, that what they're looking at with mankind, everything that's happened around the world, somewhere around 11,000, 15,000 years, there seems to be resets in society, civilization. Now, total civilization is disappearing, and then you have people come and recycle what exists. But there is a connection in that show I was mentioning at radio. It's called Revelations of the Pyramid. Like, you got to understand math a little bit. And I'm not a mathematician, but they go over it in very serious depth, because once you start taking the math, and then they plot out the lines across the earth, the intersects between Cambodia, which is the Buddhist Angkor or something.
All of our religious centers around the world.
The religious center there is also built on a constellation. It maps out the constellation of Draco, and it reflects that as it was appearing to them in 10,500 BC. And then you have
well, down in South America, they've used that laser technology to look through the rainforest to see the monolithic Mayan temples that are built there. Same kind of religious center.
The biggest pyramid in existence is
can't see it from above. You got to use special technology just to see it.
It's a mountain. They thought forever it was just a mountain over jungle. And it was a jungle claimed a pyramid. Unbelievable. And then how about the Nazca Lines? That is fascinating.
Yeah.
The Nazca Lines, man, are probably one of those. That's one of the only places I've not been to that I really want to go to. And they're having tourism there, which is vandalizing it. People are taking the stones and removing them from the lines so they can spell their names.
Awful.
That's absolutely ridiculous. It's unreal that people would do it. But those lines going straight across mountains. I mean, I consider myself not stupid, moderately intelligent. I can get some stuff done crafty if I put my mind to it. It might not be the way someone who's a master of the craft does it.
Yeah.
You can relate. You'll make it work. You'll figure out a way to do it. But
I like to think of it as adaptable.
to come across and draw lines from one religious center to another across mountains and have no variation off that line, and all these intersects. And then there's one mountain there which is completely cut off. On top of it's flattened. Looks like a runway. I can't help but put that together with those little golden Mayan airplanes that they found all through Central and South America. Little gold figurines they find at sites. A German corporation took that gold figurine that looks like an airplane. They put it in one of those laser measurement boxes, whatever it is, and they made a 4-foot version of it. Flies perfectly with the flight characteristics of any modern jet fighter.
Wow.
And so that has debunked that you're talking about an ancient civilization making these little golden things that look like airplanes with a stabilizer.
What if
wings?
What if our perception of aliens isn't really aliens? What if it's time travelers?
Or if
what if it's us checking on us?
In religion, I mean, that pretty much it. War in heaven. Lucifer gets cast out of heaven. The angels that rallied around to defend God. And then I believe there's another group of angels. Ones that were confused, horrified by the war they saw around them. Instead of engaging and taking God's side or taking Lucifer's side, they huddled in masses and sang song, prayer, to drown out the madness around them. So the way I understand it, Satan gets cast from heaven, defeated, he's banished. And then God takes his wrath immediately to the other group of angels, who did not fight against him, but did not stand up and defend him either. And so they were cast from heaven's realm as well. And they're mentioned as heaven having many principalities. It's very possible that you're talking about, when people talk about grays, humanoids, they say there's like Nords that look supposed to be like 6-foot humans, very, very godlike looking, perfect humans. It's very possible that if we do have other aliens, that they are all under God's plan. And if they were angels by any chance at one time and they were just stripped of a lot of their rankage and power, one could question if that's maybe what it is.
You know, my kids used to ask me about aliens when they were little, and I said, you know, if you look at our planet is 75% water. If you were going to travel to this planet that looks blue from the outside, what would make you think, I want to check out the life on the land? If it's covered mostly by water, you'd go, we're just assuming that they look and talk like us and breathe like us.
Yeah, there's I've read a lot about the subject, man, and they say that,
why wouldn't you investigate the ocean? Why wouldn't you?
The UFO Disclosure Project with Dr. Stephen Greer and the astronauts and the high-ranking government officials from around the world, former Canadian Minister of Defense, he's talking about one of the big G7 countries, have a Minister of Defense come forward and say that absolutely the aliens are here and they've been in communication with our governments and that there's a huge cover-up because they feel like humanity can't handle it. It dissolves the fabric of society. Somehow people are going to have this fear of religion.
Maybe movies like Men in Black is supposed to ease us into it.
Maybe so.
It's like a slow gentrification of us going, yeah, of course, obviously.
If you want to see something neat about aliens, man, they say there's no evidence, but I went to Roswell and took this tour with that old man that you see on TV all the time. He does tours. You rent him out for a few $100. He'll take your family, spend half the day with you, and take you all through Roswell where him as a child went through the whole event. Takes you by the houses, takes you by the hangar, takes you where the rancher brought in and met the sheriff. All the different things there. And fascinating thing about it, then they take you by this little touristy attraction, not the UFO McDonald's that they have there. They have a UFO McDonald's. But they have the UFO, the Alien Museum.
I'm always leery of the showman who's like, hey, I got bills to pay. Come on in the door, guys. I got a story to tell you.
Let me tell you something about that museum. Blew my
sort of like having a Southern Baptist preacher yell at you with fire and brimstone stories of, you better pay me some money, you're all going to hell.
They're actually, it's just not quite like that at all. You have a town that was completely they were set back in ways that you wouldn't imagine, man. It's like they suffered a lot of ridicule. They were torn apart. A lot of the newspapers that were originally pressed were confiscated. The Army did go in there and take control of the town for a while. You have a lot of different things, but when you go in their museum, the compelling stuff that I found in that museum, it's not the physical evidence. You say, okay, here's a piece of the UFO. They're not going to let that fold into your hand, just like no one can hardly find a piece of moon rock anymore. Mm-hmm. They're all gone. Most of them. Even the one that used to be here in Florence. Disappeared. That's lost. Used to be out at that air museum that they have by the airport.
I got some in the backyard I can sell you.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you
it's
it's
worth a fortune. If you got a piece this big, if you got a piece the size of your thumbnail, bro, you in good dealings.
Hey, boy.
But
you want to buy some
moon
moon
rock?
rock?
What they have in there that was really compelling for me? The high-ranking officials, and let's say like this, astronauts. Astronauts are like heroic. I mean, it's like this is the heroes of the world. Kids dream of. Come on, guy stepping foot on the moon. Oh, no conspiracists here, please, at the moment. But you're talking about all these different people, Buzz Aldrin. Why would people who have this much clout and infamy for doing something so epically heroic to take humanity to another place, why would they waste their time to say before their deaths that it's all real? Mm-hmm. What ridicule they put themselves through. General Douglas MacArthur, after World War II.
Unless you're doubling down, unless you're like, this is the thing I'm selling. I've got to sell it to the end.
Well, no, I mean, it's like they come forth and they said, look,
I mean, I always look at you got to play devil's advocate in any story and go, okay, let's just say you had a viewpoint on going to the moon and you're like, I believe people went to the moon. At a certain point, though, in your arguments, you have to go, what if I play devil's advocate and argue against myself? What would be the other position? So you have to kind of poke holes in your own story a little bit, and then go, is there any validity?
Believes.
I like looking at it from both points of view because then it allows you to argue with both sides if you want to.
Well, there are some new things that happen.
Yeah.
And I know, look at Douglas MacArthur after World War II, 1950s. Douglas MacArthur, they've got all these plaques up on the wall in the museum. Historical figures from presidents to everything, making commentary that just doesn't make sense. Why are you going to be Douglas MacArthur, who just kicked the Japs back onto their island finally and triumphantly returns to the Philippines and everything? Why would he say that Earth has entered a new age where we no longer will be having conflict with each other, but are now facing
a bigger enemy
that comes from outside our solar system? It sounds whacked. And I just don't see someone like Douglas MacArthur putting his name on the line. And when you look at all the famous people they have there to talk about it, and the countless eyewitnesses of high-ranking officials that would do nothing but get ridiculed. There's that Dr. Braddock, I think, the old dentist from here in Florence. Mm-hmm. He got addicted to painkillers, lost his practice. But when he was a young doctor, he married his wife, and I met these people here in Florence many years ago. Became very good friends with the old doctor, who was a brilliant guy. And he says, Ron, do you believe in aliens? And I said, yeah, in fact I do. And then he says, man, I got to tell you what happened to me and my wife. They had a beach house down in Georgetown or Murrells Inlet, 1950s. He said, back then, Ron, there weren't too many houses. And so we'd gone out to eat, and we were doing some dancing, and then we came back to our beach house at the end of the night there to drive out to their beach house, and there weren't so many houses. Mm-hmm. They were spread out. You had property. You could actually be secluded a little bit. You had neighbors, but they were a little bit farther away. And he said they were driving, and suddenly they were enveloped with a huge blinding white light, stopped their vehicle, and this guy's wife, he's telling me the story, the old man, looking at me. But what really gave me the chills is while he's telling me what happened with them, they got out of their car and looked at a giant bright white light that made no sound, and they were still a few hundred yards from their house. And he says, this thing came and just stopped over us. And we were standing there utterly just stunned and terrified at the same time and whatever we were going through. And then it slowly started moving and it went away and got faster and faster and went up, gone. And and when he was telling me that, the one thing that got me, I glanced over at his wife sitting in a chair not 20 feet away off to the side. Didn't interrupt her husband at all. But what she did sent chills down my spine. I knew they were telling the truth because she just wept. She was no longer looking at him. She was no longer looking at me. She was looking up through the ceiling and she was crying. And she was, as he was telling the story, she was seeing it. It was the most chilling thing I've ever experienced. And I said to him, did you tell anyone? He says, are you kidding? We just had I just opened up a practice.
Yeah.
If we'd mentioned what happened, we'd have been ridiculed. It would have ruined our lives. We'd have had to put up with everything. I think you meet people like that, there's something going on. And then my dad disappeared at sea on the boat when Escapade was lost. And the last letter that we received, when I was already living here in Florence, when the Coast Guard contacted me and asked if I'd heard from my father. I'd run away from my father like a year and a half earlier, maybe. He had 7 people on board with him. One of them was his girlfriend. They were sailing from South America, Argentina, Brazil up north by Venezuela, Argentina or something up that way. They were sailing, and when you're at sea for a week or more, what do? You work, you sleep, you eat, you try and find things to pass time, and you write letters. And his girlfriend was writing a 25-page letter. It turned out to be a 25-page letter that she sent to her family in California. It was the last time they ever heard from her. And what happened is that how they found out she was disappeared? That they disappeared. They never heard from her. There were 6 other people other than my father, other than her, 7 other people, 8 people total, 6 people from Europe. All disappeared. Escapade never made it to Bermuda. They were going to go through the Caribbean. They were heading back to Europe to avoid the hurricane season. When I'm reading through this letter that was forwarded to us by the family, and I'm reading through this handwritten letter, photocopy, and when I get to about page 15 or something, 17, the dialogue changes. From, we're doing this, boring, caught a fish, we're sailing here, miss you guys, all this kind of stuff, to suddenly something has happened. And this woman goes into Escapade for 2 nights in a row, being surrounded by a dozen or more brightly lit objects that came out of the ocean off the coast of South America and circled around the vessel, changing colors, dancing to and fro, so bright, far enough away from the boat that you can't tell what it is, and then going back into the ocean and disappearing. They were scared. When it happened the second night in a row, the woman's talking about it in the letter, and they said, Lou has decided, my dad, Captain, we're going to divert course. We're heading into Caracas, I think is where, if I remember correctly, they wanted to all buy a movie camera and try and film the event.
Yeah.
And she mailed this letter, but in the course of that letter, she said, we were scared. We don't know what they are, and all of us, we can only agree on one thing. They're not from here. When I saw that letter, that was another reminder to me. It's one of the factors that triggered me believing in the alien stuff. But years later, I'm watching one of those UFO specials on TV, and they had this special about USOs, what they call underwater, USO, submersible, unidentified submerged object. And they were talking about that in the exact latitude, longitude area off South America, where ships have seen objects come out of the water and go inland, or come from inland and go underwater.
There's a great story from Commander Fravor that's been public. They finally allowed them to talk about it publicly. And he's not a UFO guy. He's just like, the footage of his aircraft where he was tracking what they call Tic Tac, unidentified object. It looked like a Tic Tac. And he said they tracked it.
Big event.
They saw it, hover over water at a time. There was something else under the water that was there. He talked about it very matter-of-factly, but he was like, we tried to chase, we tried to pursue. It took off in a direction that no aircraft that I know of could do. He said then it returned to the same exact spot and hovered for like 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And he said, and we're in planes, so we're flying by it, and we're like, well, crap, it's just sitting there.
For the first time ever, what you're talking about with the Tic Tacs?
Mm-hmm.
You remember last year what happened in the news? First time ever, the Department of Navy addressed Congress. A fighter squadron, which is responsible from one of the naval fighter squadrons, which is responsible for flying coastal security duty along our 200-mile coastal boundaries along the United States, has for several years had daily encounters with Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
That
was one of the things he talked about with this guy. He said they had records of it happening all the time.
They got it now, man. They showed that one famous thing they showed to Congress that got leaked out. And it's like it shows an object flying over the ocean, and the guy and his wingman are trying to lock onto it. They're having this high-energy chatter between the two of them. And they're showing an object which is at sea level doing thousands of miles an hour.
Yeah. There's one part where they try to lock onto it, and it blocks them.
The heads-up display...
Yeah.
He can't get it to keep up. The object is like the heads-up display, the reticulate little square inside the grid there he's looking at to target.
They're scrambling them.
Is like, as they're moving like this, it can't keep up with them. The object's going fast. So he turns into it in a thing like that and gets a lock. And he goes, yahoo, I got it. But that object, moving at that speed and then stopping, and then they have the Tic Tacs, the reason that they addressed Congress, the Navy, because of a near collision that happened with an F-18 and one of the objects that almost cost the life of the pilot. And the Navy said to Congress that whatever this is, we are completely unprepared for it.
Yeah, he was saying that at one point this thing just moved vertically 1,000 yards.
And
without any
ability to go underwater,
with no thrust, with no sign of any wings or heat,
no heat blossom,
no heat signature,
which means it has to be an anti-gravitational. Or
and then as they're tracking it, it then drops, some ridiculous amount to be submergible underwater.
From altitude.
Doesn't even disturb the ocean when it goes underwater.
It goes underwater. And then, according to the Nimitz group, carrier group, was off the Catalina Island in California.
That's exactly the one you're talking about.
And supposedly had they've spotted with all the ship's radars a armada of like 100 of the objects.
Yeah, he said in his briefing, he said they told him about what they saw, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we've been tracking these things for weeks."
So then they have the nuclear in a task force, in the carrier task force.
Yeah,
you have 2 attack subs escorting that carrier. They're sub killers to make sure no one can come around that aircraft carrier, and then all the destroyers, tenders, cruisers, everything else that's with them. So you got all that. They see it, and then this thing goes from 30,000 feet and goes underwater.
Mm-hmm.
And then the nuclear submarine tracks it, going 150 knots.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing we make.
It's not moving the waves. It's not showing any trail.
There's some interesting stuff about that. I happen to believe that there's something which has higher technology than us, has a vested interest.
Yeah.
According to Dr. Stephen Greer and the Alien Disclosure Project, they said that the former Canadian Minister of Defense said that there was a message given to the U.S. government when we dropped the first bomb in New Mexico that they contacted. Now, that's an absurd thought, but he claims that UFO, the alien intelligence, a race, contacted our government and said, you are at war and developing a technology that can destroy your planet. If you back away from that, we might interject and share technologies that could power your whole planet peacefully, no pollution. But apparently, according to the Canadian Minister of Defense, Russia, England, the United States took that as a threat and chose instead to treat them as hostiles, resulting in a few of the objects being knocked down. Now, if that's true, you have some interesting things that go with it. During World War II, we think of the band, the Foo Fighters, right? The Foo Fighters are what? What Allied pilots thought was a secret Japanese weapon. These lights that would dance around B-29 bombers and fighters, move around them. They couldn't keep up with them. They danced around them, and they would disappear. They were afraid of it. Pilots called them Foo Fighters. They didn't know what they were, but they thought there was a secret weapon of the enemy.
Is that how they came up with the name of the band?
I think that's where the band's name would come from.
Really?
Yeah, Foo Fighters. That's like it. But the other thing is also the thing to note is the Japanese were seeing them too, and thought that they were their enemy's secret weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And the Germans were seeing them, and the British were seeing them.
Well, yeah, it's easy to displease. I mean, like if you were just the average person and you're hearing about this, you would go, "That sounds like secret technology nobody was supposed to know about," and blah blah blah. And then you start hearing more and more information from people like fighter pilots or astronauts or something like that, where they go, "No, this is disturbing because this isn't something we have."
What's fascinating about it is you look at the history of aerodynamics.
Yeah.
And so you take flight from the Wright flyer.
When you hear that from people who are supposed to be at the top echelon of what they know and going, "Yeah, we have no idea what this is," then you go
from the Wright.
Okay,
flyer,
well,
you look at the technological jump.
Yeah.
The Wright flyer to, in a matter of 40 years, 50 years.
breaking the sound barrier, breaking Mach 5.
But there's a limitation. The electronic development, that's what's neat.
Yeah.
Fiber optics. Computers going from like your cell phone.
Rare metals.
Your cell phone has all of the power in that one phone that's equivalent to the entire NORAD nuclear defense grid that was hidden in the mountains with those giant computer systems that took up a city block.
It's more technology than put astronauts on the moon.
Yes, in that one thing. It's an incredible
phone.
thing to see it transpire.
Yeah.
So where does that make sense a little bit? Maybe humanity can make big jumps like that. Okay, maybe. But I tend to think that when you're jumping like that it makes a lot of sense that somebody crashed something and you got reverse engineering going on.
Well, I mean, that's one of the stories about, Bob Lazar. He came out and talked about it. They had a Netflix show about it, and he went on Joe Rogan to talk about it, and he was like,
And you know what? He can't be disproven because he's day lie detectors and everything like that, and they've actually found enough material to show that he knows what he's talking about.
He's like, I was one of the scientists hired to take things apart and figure out how they work, and he said I wasn't the only one, and I wasn't allowed to mess with everything. I was in charge of one particular thing. He talks about working on the cabin of this craft and deconstructing the cabin of this craft. And he goes, to fit in there, you'd have to be a certain sized person or humanoid or whatever you want to call it, a being, to fit in it. And he goes, and the materials were unlike anything we'd ever seen before. And the technology was unlike anything we'd ever seen before.
The big thing is we can't do that because it's like, our flight is what? Our flight's based on a frame.
Propulsion.
Aircraft propulsion and a frame strength.
A rigid frame,
which is designed to keep the aircraft together.
Yeah.
At a rate of speed.
Yeah, when you see a plane fly, you're just like, how in the world is that heavy thing going? But it's just propulsion versus velocity.
And strength and its structure.
The strength and the structure.
To have that lift. But the neat thing about it is, we're talking about something going stationary and then reversing direction.
That's gravity.
That is
manipulating gravity in a way.
You have to have gravity neutralizing going on.
Well, and he talks about seeing things fly during that time that they had repaired. The thing that they did was really fascinating, but he was like, I'm
familiar with it.
He said it didn't fly like, you'd think science fiction where the spaceship has got the flat side on the ground. He goes, it would turn perpendicular and it would fly flat side towards what it was going to.
He said it was Slave One.
It would just move in a way that didn't look aerodynamic at all.
Slave One. It lands, takes off, goes like this, and then moves forward.
It's crazy.
Crop circles.
Yeah. Well, you know what, man? It's like this. It's interesting because Dr. Stephen Greer was from SETI. He headed SETI, and Dr. Stephen Greer. I mean, the guy's he's not just a surgeon. He's a doctor that devoted years and years of his life to trying to contact. And now you can go online and contact Dr. Stephen Greer, and you can take his seminar and go with them, and they will go out in the desert out west.
I read recently that they're trying to set up a telescope on the dark side of the moon. They're going to try and build one on the dark side of the moon to get a better image of what's out there. And it's like, okay, That's pretty interesting because then you're getting away from a lot of the interference that you would have from light from the sun, because the moon, there's always a dark side. It always faces us in a certain way.
Well, that's a very interesting characteristic. I'm not sure.
But it's going to be very hard to build, because they're going to have to transport materials up there. They're going to have to build it, and apparently the temperature up there
you mention that, but I mean,
so cold.
That the moon is quite a very interesting satellite in itself,
and it's very magnetic. It's one of a kind in the fact that it doesn't rotate. It only faces one way all the time.
Yes, that's another thing. And then there's another anomaly which I've been reading about, which is incredible: the impact craters. When we look at the moon and you see a full moon, and you look at the craters that are all over the moon's face, there's an amazing thing. They're all the same depth, no matter the size. They're stumped over it. They cannot generally explain it. Now, the astronauts said, the ones that walked on the moon, you can see the original interview where the three of them are sitting there talking to the press. And that man who took the first step on the moon, something was wrong, because he spends a lot of time staring at the floor. And he was obviously duressed. But he did come out later and say, yes, they were there. And he said they were watching. When they landed, that they could see their craft on the horizon of the craters. Now, this is crazy to say, but the first mission that went by the moon, remember, wasn't to land on the moon. It was to test the slingshot trajectory.
Yeah.
Go around the moon, come back. Buzz Aldrin.
Because the question was, could we return?
No. Yes, they had to test their trajectory to make sure they slingshot back and everything goes variable like that in one of the Apollo missions. Buzz Aldrin claims that on that mission, he named it the Tower of Babel. When they went around the dark side of the moon and saw the sun rise for the first time from human eyes as they're coming around the dark side, one of the things is that they were lost contact with Earth, but started to pick up all this stuff which they described as like a
radio signals,
alien chorus of signals. It was really they were a little bit disturbed by it. The astronauts themselves don't think it was a anomaly. And Buzz Aldrin says that they spotted structure.
Well, it was I think it was this winter. They publicly came out and said that they realized they were receiving radio signals from outer space, and they couldn't explain what it was. They didn't know how to decipher it. But they were like, "This is the first time we've actually picked up signals," and I thought it was very unusual that they're willing to tell the public. But they were openly telling the public of, we're picking up these signals.
There's two different. We landed on the moon. What?
69.
Twice though, right? It was a return mission.
Oh, we've been back several times.
Okay, maybe 3. I don't think.
No, I think there's been like 8 different walks on the moon.
Man, really? That says my ignorance on it. But there's an amazing thing. The first experiment they set up on the first landing in the moon was trying to study the surface of the moon, trying to figure out anomalies that they were seeing. Now, Buzz Aldrin claims that they saw the tower. He named it the Tower of Babel, which is supposed to be a multi-kilometer structure, like a needle sticking out the backside. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of conjecture that the moon is a intelligent design object that was placed there for its manipulation on Earth, how it affects our tides, and the argument that
it's crazy the magnetic pull that it has.
The magnetic pull, the effect it has on Earth. It's a very unique object in the body. Some other satellites going around planets are turning.
What if we're a reality TV show and that's actually a camera watching us the whole time, and that's why the light's always on?
It could be some kind of chariot of God. It could be one of God's vacation resorts where he's going, I don't know. But you know what, man? There is something to wonder about this. Is that they did do this experiment on the moon, and it's a fact. You ever heard of the gong effect, the bell effect?
Mm-mm.
There's so much argument to say that the moon could be hollow, that they think that it's not a solid object. They put seismic receptors when they landed on the moon. They took seismic activity to read the geological movement of the moon's surface. When they took off from the moon and jettisoned the propulsion unit, when it struck the moon, it created a vibration that picked up on all of their sensors that they had placed for almost, I think it's like 40 minutes, almost an hour. Like the gong effect, like a bell ring. It happened again every single time they landed on the moon when they start taking off.
Okay, let's play devil's advocate. What if it's just the fact that there's a lack of any sound and that is the only sound. So it's picking up a vibration because of that sound.
Well,
Maybe
you
it
would think, okay, you're
maybe
in a
it
vacuum.
moves in a wave.
You're in a vacuum and you're touching an object.
That's true. I didn't think about the vacuum
The
effect.
vacuum effect has got to have something, but you're talking about an object which is sitting there resonating because you're sitting there taking, I'm not going to drop anything on your beautiful table, but I'm just saying a big object slowly comes down from its gravitational pull.
Well, they believe that it's made a lot, like they believe that the moon has a iron substance on one side of it especially. That's why it always faces us, because of the magnetic pull between the iron and the
Supposed to be pretty
magnetic.
valuable, whatever it is. I understand there's also the what you would need for potential. There's another hydrogen. There's another thing there which would be theoretically, I think, would use cold fusion. There is something there they want to mine. There's something very valuable there.
Helium is needed in cold fusion, and that's apparently on a rarity right now.
But they say there's always a shortage of that. You can't make it.
Yeah.
You can't create helium.
Yeah.
But
How do you find
dust,
helium?
They have a lot of different things there that cause problems. Space dust.
Yeah.
Whatever's on the surface of that. Now you think of a meteorite, whatever it is, struck the surface, however big, you can't control its speed. I mean, logically, if you got low gravity situation like on the moon, and you're talking about a 50,000 ton object striking at 1,000 miles an hour, the impact crater is going to have to do something different from a chunk of rock that blew up on the other side of the moon from a previous strike that went away from the moon for a little while and came back at a leisurely 280 miles an hour.
There's
the moon.
You're talking about the dark side of the moon and all that. There is a Netflix movie, I forget the name of it, but it's supposed to be about how Nazi Germany had built this structure on the dark side of the moon so they couldn't be detected.
They're referring
and they could, advance their civilization.
The power of Babel.
Yeah. It was I didn't watch it. I watched the preview of it, but at a certain point in the preview, there's a guy riding a dinosaur, and I went, "I'm out."
Yeah. Well, but then you have the other thing. The Nazis. You have the bell.
Yeah.
There are some old photographs which they don't think are tampered, ridiculous things of showing discs. There's a Nazi disc. Now those things are, if they're fake photos, they're done really interesting, and then they have that one structure that they don't know what it was used for. When the U.S. went there and captured certain areas in enemy territory, there was a large underground research facility that they didn't go into, but rather detonated all the entrances, buried it alive. They blew it away, and that's supposedly where they think the bell was. The bell supposedly being an experiment in time travel, perhaps dimensional travel. But then you have this UFO sighting that happened in Pennsylvania that crashed.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be like, the consensus is that's a very similar object. Now, the Germans were into the occult. They were into all sorts of things, pursuing the belief that they were part of a God master race. And if anything said about what the Canadian Minister of Defense said, and they're all seeing Foo Fighters, and they're all having encounters, the Russians have come forward, the Russian test pilot that was involved in a dogfight where they were actually successfully able to shoot down, what she says, an alien craft because it collided with one of the fighter's missiles by accident. It went in the face of the missile and got knocked down. So they recovered one. Everyone reverse engineering. There are Russian wingless, liftless body shapes. They look like a cigar.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like a little tiny, if you looked at it from the front, it would look like a little flattened edge around the lift of it. Real wide, they fly. You got the giant triangles, the Phoenix Lights.
Mm-hmm.
That was filmed by hundreds of people and witnessed by thousands.
New Jersey, Pennsylvania.
All the way down, it was watched going all the way through the Midwest. The same light configuration, supposed to be like a frickin' mile long. Silent. And even the governor of Arizona.
What about I got a friend of mine that's from the Philippines, and he posts things every now and then of sounds coming from the clouds and disturbances in the atmosphere where it looked like a vibration like above the earth. Just there's nothing there, but it sounds like trumpets
It's hard to say what that is, but they had the Chicago incident where at O'Hare Airport, an object came and hovered over O'Hare, which was at the time the busiest airport in the world. And the witnesses who saw it said a hole opened up in a cloud, like a donut, opened up, and an object came through. And they actually got photographs of that hole. Perfect, it's like the object suddenly went, and that hole sucked up in on itself, rising up. I guess whatever drag or pull, and I mean those are pretty weird things to have happen. We can't explain everything.
I like the not knowing. I don't know. This may sound weird, but I like the speculation and I like the discussion more than I like knowing.
Oh yeah, it's good for the imagination, but
right.
It's like
I love
Bermuda
the inspiration of it and the idea of the questions of what if this and what if. I mean, it sort of blends into some magical ideas that you have as a child of looking up at the stars and going, man, I wonder what if. It's fun to speculate and to have that imagination. And if you knew for certain, you'd be like, okay, well, crap. It would sort of let you down in a way, I think.
Well, maybe so. But then again, if there's such a thing that they claim like there's 20 known or more races that have actually been to Earth, according to SETI and the Disclosure Project. They say that. Some of them they say are malevolent, are not aligned to our best interests, and then some of them have been working with our governments because they have mutual enemies in space. And they know that if that's true, you got to wonder though: are we anything more than a petri dish? I mean, what do we do with a lab rat?
What if we're an experiment? What if we okay? So I'm fascinated with things like octopus that can change its RNA, its DNA, its shape, its color. It can regrow limbs. Each one of its limbs has a separate brain that does its own thing at times, but it works also as a group. If it senses danger, it can detach a limb. I'm like, what?
It's incredible, but it's still not quite like us.
The octopus and the lobster can live forever. The only way it dies is to be killed. That's the only way it dies. It can genetically live forever. Obviously, that's an alien.
Sharks don't get cancer.
Right. But if you look at the animal life around us and you go, well, that's obviously an alien, and that's obviously an alien, and you see some insects once in a while.
Because of the variation of life, the absurdity of all the different...
It's so odd. It's so strange. It doesn't follow any rhyme or reason as to why it is what it is. If it's alien
life, I question the intelligence, because the one thing I'll say, and it goes back to the religious thing, is like, okay, you got whales.
Well, we're gauging our intelligence based upon our perception.
Yes, but then again, I would think that there's something reasonable to consider if you throw in the fact that we have something which makes humanity a little bit different. We have the ability to reason in a different level. What I mean by that is, like, you look at there's dolphins in the Navy. Mm-hmm. They've been serving since the Vietnam War.
Yeah, to find mines and other
carrier
crafts.
Task Force.
Yeah,
has at least 2 of them for every carrier. Mm-hmm. Special launches, going to amphibious ships. They live life. Kind of like that old TV show, Sequest.
Yeah.
So you have these dolphins. They come on board.
Oh, just it's in here, but you can go through this door and that door. It's like a Jack and Jill. Yeah.
If you look at intelligence, and obviously there are very intelligent creatures that just do amazing things. But if you look at whales and dolphins, which have an ability to communicate and echolocation, advanced minds, and whale song, I've heard it for years. It can be heard from species all the way across an ocean, man.
Yeah.
To make a voice which can
and as dense as the ocean is, with as much life as it has and as much interference as it has, they can hear each other.
It's a complicated song, and they have their own languages.
Yeah.
Now, if they're so intelligent, the only thing I would ask is this.
Well, and the crazy part
Bartholomew,
is, like, our understanding of it.
Japanese whaling ship, you're about 200 clicks from it. Go the other way.
Right.
And you can't get dolphins to avoid tuna nets.
And somehow they've determined somehow that dolphins have their own dialects depending upon where they live around the planet.
They also go to war.
They have names for each other. It's crazy the stuff that they do. Yeah.
I witnessed it too between Bermuda and the Azores. More dolphins than we ever saw in our life. to the horizon, as far as we could see, all the way around is dolphins. It's a grouping that happens. They get together to avoid inbreeding. Mm-hmm. They break up into pod armies, allies. They form alliances, and the males battle over the females. Victors taking the spoils, and that's how they. One of the ways they.
It's crazy.
It's incredible.
So you look at all this alienish looking life here on this planet, and you go, "Is that it? Is that where we draw the line?" At octopuses and dolphins and crustaceans? Is that where we draw the line? Or are we possibly part of that group that we don't realize?
I think we're part of it. It goes back to a creational belief, God.
Yeah.
It's like, God certainly is not bored, because I'm sure that God to this day, not speaking for him, but I would just imagine as I see God, that to this day, he's still creating. There's a lot going on in the world that we'll never imagine. And the universe is one.
Maybe it's a goal to constantly keep us questioning and to keep us looking for answers and to keep us interested. I mean, if we knew exactly this pen is black and white, and that was the whole knowledge of what you needed to know, you'd go, all right, well, that's boring. But if you got to look out your window and you get to see a tapestry of things happening on with different life forms and different possibilities, and you get to see colors like this thing behind me, you then have a fascination about life, and you get to find the joy.
The limitation, how little of our mind we use.
Yeah. It allows us to expand our ideas and to expand our curiosity and ask questions about what if and why not. And then it allows us to have discourse with each other where we can argue and supposedly come to an answer at some point, but not. Well, maybe not.
I hope we never come to answers.
Maybe it's the conversation that's needed.
We never agree.
Yeah. Maybe it's the conversation that's the whole point. Maybe that's the part. Maybe it's the community.
It is.
The back and forth, with ideas.
How boring it would be if you don't have, it's the great thing about the American experiment. Here we made a melting pot, and the idea is to celebrate those differences. All these things that we can talk about.
And we're constantly pushing each other and shoving each other and trying to challenge each other's beliefs and ideas and what's important to you and what's important to me and how do we make this all work.
Everyone thinks they have the answer.
Let's all talk about it. The conversation is what keeps it interesting.
It also opens your mind, and one cannot understand your own beliefs unless you understand the foundations of others to see how they revolve and affect yours.
I mean, one of my favorite things that Joe Rogan said, he said, I just want a politician one day to get on public television or whatever and say, yeah, I used to believe this, and I've looked at it, and I was just full of crap. I didn't know anything. So this is what I've learned. And just change your course of your opinion.
Gotta say, I really like Trump for that. It's amazing that you can see him on Oprah from so many years ago.
Yeah.
And he's saying the exact same beliefs that he started doing here when he became president. He believed the same thing, that we're being a stupid nation, that our freedoms are being abused by others who go between the lines in the fabric of our free society to take advantage and exploit, steal our things. God knows the coronavirus.
Same stuff Ross Perot was saying years ago when we all thought he was crazy.
Yeah, the only problem with Ross Perot, though, was like some little turtle dude, man, trying to tell you that he's going to be a leader of the world was a very difficult concept. I think he's like a little tiny turtle of a man almost.
But if you go back and look at the stuff he was warning us about, you're like, crap, he was right.
If he had a different voice and a little more stature.
Yeah. I mean, if you look like Robert Redford, you'd be like, this guy's on top of it.
Yeah, it's like, but exactly. But it's like, it's just amazing. Did you catch any of the news, man, with the coronavirus stuff?
I've caught way more news than you want to know.
Yeah, it's like I've seen a lot of it. And I know everyone's scared about it.
Yeah,
it is terrifying. I mean, I don't see how anyone, if you're a conspiracy theorist that thinks that this is all a bunch of bull and that the government's reaching for a power grab, I don't know. The images from Italy and Spain are pretty.
I like the answer. I don't know. I wish more people would say I don't know and just stand by it.
I meant that with a certain amount of sarcastic weight to say that I wonder what happened to Italy.
I know.
It's like it's pretty scary.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's people ask me all the time because I think about this kind of stuff a lot and I talk to people all the time and people ask me what is your opinion and I'm like I don't know. I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know what the recovery is going to be like. I don't know what the new world is going to be like when this is all changed. I don't know that it is going to be the same. I think that we are forever changed in a way. We're going to be a little more guarded. We're going to be a little more cautious of coming into contact with people. It's weird. It's very weird. I I went to Walmart the other day to do some shopping, and it was amazing how they automatically have the plexiglass thing set up. Not plexiglass, but the molded plastic set up just right so that it guards the cashier from
preventing exchange of air.
From particles in case someone
whatever.
sneezes or coughs directly at them. It was molded perfectly
Just
over
like buffet shields.
all of their equipment. Yeah, it was molded perfectly around their equipment, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. You know, they got a lot done pretty quickly, especially considering it was form fitted for every one of the registers. And I thought, well, that's a big step. But it's permanent enough that you go, this isn't going away. Like the local gas station down here, where is it? On the corner of like Ebenezer and Hoffmeyer, there's a Shell station down there. They already have a glass, a metal framed deal done up with hard glass over it, kind of shielding the public and the cashier from each other of coming into like a direct sneeze situation.
For some reason, that's just because they haven't got up with the times, Josh. Like the anti-robbery lock-ins, like you got over there on Hoffmeyer when they open up at night. They got that little one window. You slide your like a.
Yeah.
I mean, that's we could be looking at some permanent changes.
Yeah.
But
it makes me wonder what's going to happen with like public events, things like sporting events and things like racing and all these events that bring in large numbers of people, music concerts, comedy venues.
It's a valid question, and now they know that there are Eastern Europeans, there are European cultures, nations that have genetic mutations which make them significantly percentage resistant to HIV. And the studying they've done with that, showing I think Hungarians, a few others in Eastern Europe, and going over there, cultures that dealt severely with the plague, the ones that survived that had genetic mutations. Your immune system and everything you've gone through builds you up for something which eventually something else comes around, makes you a little tougher. Mm-hmm. Now, the corona thing that's most concerned me, and it's like, is this idea that it was not a accident. Now, there's a World Health Organization thing I think is full of crap. I've looked at the timelines.
Donald Trump came out and said that they're not going to fund the WHO anymore because of their misreporting of the situation all along.
I think that, how
this
wise is that?
This morning when I opened the news, China said the same thing. China's like, we're not going to fund the WHO either.
That's funny
for similar reasons.
I think that the Chinese government, they have been one of the biggest contributors to the WHO, and to hear the WHO make statements defending the Chinese reaction to it, when now they know specifically that China has actually gone, and it's not the Chinese people that are the enemy.
Right. It's the government.
It's the Chinese communist government. And communist government is an evil which most Americans really just don't fathom.
Most people are nice people in general. They're just trying to take care of their families. They're just trying to pay their bills.
Most people might be all right. I don't know if I agree with you. Most people are good people, because if that was the truth, the world wouldn't be so messed up.
I mean, that was one of Anne Frank's
good and evil. There's
best statements.
People.
She's like, I still believe there's a lot of good in the world.
There is, but I still think we're outnumbered, which is why we always got so much chaos.
It's like if you lived in Germany during the Nazi in what do you call it? Not entrapment during the Nazi reign. Okay, let's say you lived in Germany. You were not a Nazi. Your occupation. You just lived there. You're not part of their regime. You're not necessarily with your doctrine going, I believe this.
My grandmother
You're just
told
like,
me,
crap, I'm just trying to pay the bills and I don't want to get shot.
My grandmother, on one of my visits to Hungary, told me over dinner one time, she said that the Nazis, they didn't treat us badly when they were here like that.
Yeah.
They were aligned because of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Austrian connection to Germany. I mean, it's like, so you have alliances like that, World War I on. But there was a difference, and the consensus was that the real enemy was the Russians. There was a difference in the way they were treating the people. The Russians, when they came and pushed the Germans out, my grandmother told me they were so terrified in that building because they dare not show a female's face looking out a window. Because in that apartment building, the squares in the center, when the Germans were gone and the Russians started patrolling, they'd drink some vodka or whatever they got to drink. And they would come and they would drag women out and rape them. And that was an abuse which my grandmother said the Germans didn't do because the Germans were occupying for a long term, and so they had more gentle treatment of the general populace. And I also understand that, like, Zsa Zsa Gabor is a hero. You know, Zsa Zsa Gabor supposedly was courting SS officers as a young, beautiful blonde woman so that she could spy, ascertain information from them, and she used that counterintelligence info to liberate and save thousands of Jews. If she'd have been found out that when she was sleeping with those officers and hearing their talk and finding out, gleaning information, what would have happened to her? She'd have been one blonde in the Dachau.
Yeah.
But it's like an interesting thing there. You know, but the Russians apparently, you know, were much different, much more brutal the way they would treat. They wanted something, they'd pluck it from a tree. They didn't give a damn. And so it's like, I've heard that from lots of Hungarians, that the Russian treatment, very brutal. And that has to do something, I think, with communism again.
Yeah.
They suppress religion. Religious belief gives people what? Hope, faith.
Yeah.
Without faith in anything.
And you stifle creativity in the process.
Yeah. It's like,
so that just people fall in line.
You know, it's like everything that's been great about what we have created in the world, inventions, you know, there's a reason why the United States and the Western world, specifically our country, over time became the industrial explosion that changed the world.
Yeah. From
flight to automobiles to industrial revolution, everything. It's like we did a lot.
Through that freedom.
The system, I mean, but you take away that system and these nut jobs that are out today saying, oh, the government's got to give us a paycheck. And that's how we should survive. What an insult. So you take away a silver spoon up your rear. That's what I call it. You know? You're not scared of that, John?
I'm worried about the fact that we are all right now waiting for the government to hand us a check, and hopefully that it'll come through because people are suffering who are servers and bartenders and tattoo artists and musicians and all these jobs that are not considered essential as being healthcare right now, or food delivery or anything like that. But we're automatically putting ourselves into a debt situation of $6.2 trillion, where not all the money went to the people, it went to corporations as well. And we're going to pay that money back.
Last time, though, was it?
We're going to pay that money back, and that money's going to come from us.
I think that we're going to pay it back in one form or the other. But you know what? There is an answer to welfare.
It's going to drive up the cost of living, and it's going to drive up everything that you purchase.
We're going to face changes,
and it's going to hurt the people who needed the money the most.
Remember the lessons of the past. And I don't know if I mentioned this last time you and I were talking. I think I mentioned the CCC. And it's incredible what they did in South Carolina. But when I went traveling around the United States and saw what they did everywhere in the country, when the Great Depression happened, the masses of people that were starving, no food, no hope, and the government had a choice, what? Welfare? Well, indeed, that's what they did. But they did it different. They created the Civilian Conservation Corps. And so those people who were able to work with whatever skill they had, and if they didn't have a skill, they became laborers. And they would teach them a skill, went out and built the infrastructure of this country. Here in South Carolina, they built state parks. I can't remember which one it is that they abandoned building, and you can go see the big blocks that the stonemasons were cutting and placing when World War II started, and the funds were pulled from that because of the war. And so they never took up the construction again at the entrance of this one South Carolina state park. When you turn into the state park, you can see all the stone walls, some of the stones not even fully cut that they were laying out there. But the Civilian Conservation Corps, a little yellow circle with 3 green C's, can be seen on park buildings, on old state buildings, by the roadways, all over this country. And I even found one in an old decrepit building that I snagged because it was on the floor where it had fallen off a wall on a crumbling ruin.
So you think that'll be the future of this?
I think it would be one of the most
situation?
Well, what did welfare do exactly? Welfare took
institutionalize people to sit at home?
Exactly, because you can take a jackass, the animal, and you can have it pull a cartload of bricks. You take that fishing pole and hang a carrot at the end of it, or an apple, and let that jackass get a little nibble every now and then, and that thing will pull till it drops.
Or you let it sit at home and eat Pop-Tarts, and then it gets funded into the big pharma
Exactly,
situation.
and the bricks go nowhere. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Is it was a brilliant thing there. Is that, you know what? I understand humanity, people go through weak times. We have a responsibility as a wealthy nation to take care of our own. It's an atrocity to see homeless veterans, homeless people that have mental problems. This is the criminal neglect of what our otherwise successful society is. And it's sad to see that, and we would want to solve those problems. But I can't see how you can do that unless you whittle out all the jerks who have silver spoons up their ears, who settle for taking a check and make baby factories and all sorts of benefits they get from the government for not motivating. It was a racist maneuver from the beginning, in my opinion, to separate the male from the female, because there's more economic gain for a woman if she doesn't have a father around providing for her kid. She gets a check. How much more racist could that maneuver have been to create a people that are stuck on a nipple, dependent? And I'm not trying to make such a hard subject like that. I just wish my fellow Americans of every color out there could understand that me as a first-generation American and traveling all over the world, how much I love this country and how much we are blessed compared to others.
And when you're a kid, hopefully you're taught that if a van pulls up and goes, "Hey kid, you want some candy? Come on, get inside." You go,
Well, yeah, but
this is the same version of that.
Evil. So what I mean rather is that
this is the same version of that. This is here's some money. You want some money? Come on, sign right here.
Now we have
what I'm saying is with but so many. But you know what, man? What I guess my point is like people are very sensitive about this welfare thing. There, first of all, I mean it's very easy to get labeled racist for numerous reasons in this country, and you know. It's like you might not have any racist intent. I find it's like walking on eggshells because, I mean, I was raised globally, traveling around the world, celebrating all this diverse culture and realizing that I was nothing but a fleck of sand on an incredibly big beach. And there was no way possible I was ever going to see all the beaches. And I've seen a bunch of them. So, I mean, I kind of tried to take that position in my life. So my parents immigrate to America, and this is what drives me crazy about America, is the attitude from people, and I've heard it a lot here in South, no offense to all you Southerners, because I fell in love with this place and I'm a Southerner now too. But you talk to someone about race relations and you say, hey, can we fess up about responsibility about what we had happen in our country, right? Mm-hmm. What the division is. Why do we have an angst between some cultures, let's say black and white as an example, the generic terminology of what happened from times of slavery to lack of education, being held back. There were things that happened that we are undeniably responsible for, and so in a sense, you create that which you say you wish wasn't like that. You know, the inner city, poverty, crime, desperation, black people trying to wrap gold chains around their neck, you know, and with the dreams of spinning rims to get the hell out of the hood and have success. My God, did we not create that?
Yeah.
Did we not create it?
Yeah,
so when people say that, they say that, but the worst thing that insults me, man, is when you talk to someone about it and say, can't we just accept the responsibility that, no, they say, you know that generic term, you've heard it in your life. Man, my family didn't own no slaves. Why do I owe any restitution, man? I don't owe them nothing. I didn't do nothing to them. Well, that is I think, a very stupid answer, because my parents escaped Hungary in 1956.
Yeah.
They were poor. They came here with nothing, had to learn the language, become American citizens, and became successful working hard. Were they responsible for what happened?
If you guys don't know about that, go back and listen to the last podcast I had with Ron White. He talks about his mom and dad escaping Hungary. Go back and listen to that.
Yeah, but you think about that, man. It's like all of us are foreigners. We all immigrated. But if we were to look at it and say, just one generation back, like I'm a first-generation American, first natural birth. And I certainly am not responsible for what happened to the African-American condition here, except by my own choice, I realize that, yes, I am responsible.
I'm a little more privileged than someone who isn't my color.
I'm responsible.
I realize that.
And beyond that, that is inclusive in my point, and it's because I am responsible because we are Americans, and you inherit the mistakes and sins of your nation.
Yeah.
Our nation is bleeding from wounds that have
Well,
never.
I believe
truly
it's
been
the
healed.
idea of if you have the power to speak up, speak up.
That's true, man.
Like there's in my business delivering food to restaurants and stuff like that.
You know this very much so. She has a lot of experience, man, because of her working in business around the African American culture for many years.
I've probably spent about 10 years running hip hop clubs.
I mean, it's like she's been in tune with it, and she's seen a lot of hypocrisy. She's seen a lot of tragedy. She's very sympathetic.
Oh yeah, I
to,
mean, in
the
Hartsville,
plight.
they have such a strong gang influence that when I was working at the last club I was working at over there, several times a month, somebody's dead, somebody's shot, somebody's killed.
Yeah.
Yes,
It almost got to be to the point that you just couldn't even.
What happened? Because, it's like if you look at Africans as a whole, I'll tell you one thing about Africans.
Well, I think a lot of it's a broken home, though. You're dealing with a situation, unfortunately, where a lot of dads aren't in the picture, and these young boys are getting.
That was my point.
Older gentlemen
That was my point.
lead them.
Exactly.
Sometimes that path is not a great path.
You take away hope.
It's easy money.
Yeah.
And even like you're talking about with welfare system and things like that. If you're selling drugs and you're doing this, you're still getting all of that.
Yeah.
So there's
And it's
a
the
lot of
desperation
incentive
effect of all your incentive to work hard has gone away.
Which is why I think we need a short, sharp shock, as the British say, and bring back the CCC. End this welfare ridiculous crap. You know what? No free paychecks. There are obvious reasons why a person would not be able to have your children, of course.
Rehab and things like that.
What was wrong?
We really are trying to.
What was wrong with our society with all these advances? It's like feminism is another weird subject with it, because you know what? Of course, a woman is equal to a man in every capacity. Intellectually, maybe we got bigger muscles for the most part. Just stature, physically. But the role traditionally of a man going out and working and the female being able to be a provider in the family and to create a home, there is a certain logic to that, which is beautiful. Not to say that I'm saying women should stay home. I'm just saying that we went to such an extreme where you break the traditional benefits.
Well, you got all these latchkey kids now, and a lot of women don't have the option not to work.
Look what's happening when you.
I'm right here. You can talk.
Yeah, see,
it takes two incomes really to raise a family.
We got a
nurse
lot of
that
things.
worked,
We got a lot of things to
day.
fix. We got a lot of things to fix, and it's kind of a weird way saying the CCC is almost akin to like saying going back into a slave labor. Not slave labor, it's a little extreme word, but it's almost like a step back towards that to snap out of this.
Well, there's jobs that need to be done.
You're stuck on a nipple. You got to take the kid and slap him in the head until they let go of the nipple. And then you can reestablish how you're going to feed the kid so it survives and thrives. But in the meantime, teaching the kid to do things like walk, talk, and all sorts of stuff, not just sit on a nipple.
Well, a lot of it goes with our education
Incentivize.
system.
And I think that with the things changing around the world, Trump is absolutely correct. We need to reindustrialize our nation.
Yeah.
Our ability to create
Maybe this
things.
catastrophe is going to make us realize, we should be developing our own medicines here in this country. We should move our toilet paper factories back to the areas that need it.
What happened to you people, my fellow Florence, South Carolina shoppers? Which one of you is responsible for going in there and buying 6 packs of Scott? I mean, because I think that I should take and harden those rolls with resin and use you as target practice from about 10 feet away.
I know some people
on Lysol either.
Some people work at church groups, and they were buying groups of it to take to the church and hand out to people, which is great.
Man,
it's great if that's what you're doing.
Nice and dandy.
Yeah, if that's what you're doing, awesome.
Well, let me tell you what happened to me at Schofield Hardware. That's you know what?
Wait. Can I preface it by saying you almost got arrested at Schofield Hardware?
Yeah.
We're going with the theme here.
I have had a great relationship with people that work there. That is a ma and pa kind of business.
Yeah.
The old town thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like what Carolina Hardware tries to be.
Yeah.
'Cause the difference I found between Schofield and Carolina, no offense, but just from the consumer's angle, being a critic, when I go into Carolina, I feel more like they're just watching you, like, what are you doing kind of thing. Can I help you with something?
Which is weird because Schofield
has people everywhere.
No. Schofield started Ace Hardware, sold it, and then opened up Carolina Hardware.
Yeah, but I mean, there's two ways they judge. I heard that.
Michael was married to the Schofields. That was
But there's something different.
But it's a different mentality of the people who are running it now.
When you go into Schofield, they're eager to help you with anything they can.
For those of you outside of our district, this is the local Ace Hardware place. They're very helpful, very nice.
But I went in there.
Very community-minded.
And you're looking for that golden orb of Lysol cans anywhere. And I was talking to the guy, and I was like, man, no Lysol anywhere. He says, yeah, man, everything's out. And you know what? You know what this guy does, man? He says, man, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you some insight. I probably shouldn't say it, but I already did, so it's leaked out. But a gentleman was nice enough saying, hey, look, man, I know you got your old mother at the house. I know you must be worried sick. Look, be here before the truck unloads tomorrow. I happen to hear that we do have a limited supply coming in. I'm not allowed to tell people, but your mom, you've been shopping here for years, Ron. Get your mom a can.
Yeah.
And you know what that guy did? We were looking at some guns in case we might have to go out and shoot some people and take their stuff to survive in a few years. No,
allegedly.
we were at Schofield.
You have to add the word allegedly, that way no one legally.
And you know what?
Trying to get me to get a revolver.
Suddenly, that guy, that same gentleman at that store, comes up and sits a can of Lysol in front of me and says, hey,
got you, bud.
We have to, every night, disinfect the store. And so a lot of the supplies going for that reason. These stores are having to disinfect, so they're having to hold back a certain amount of stock so that they can accomplish their job. Now, I respect that, but you know what he did? He said, man, I know a truck's coming in tomorrow, and I just wanted to make sure here you got a can.
Well, see, I hope a lot of that brings industry back. I hope that this pandemic, inspires people to go, hey, why don't I have my own factory here in the States? And I'm sure there are people out there right now looking at the financial aspect of it. To me, one of the people who's going to hurt the most is like your big name brands like Charmin and Scott and stuff like that, who for a long time have made a profit by getting the stuff made overseas and being shipped over here. Now that they're not, people are buying whatever they have available. So one of the things that we've done is we've started buying stuff from Sam's, which is just a generic toilet paper, but it's fine.
But
and so it makes you question the fact of when these other brands are available, am I going to go back to buying that? Because this stuff's just as fine and it's actually cheaper.
Right. I found that. And Sam's is a great place to start, but but then there's a price you pay for Sam's.
There's a difference between Charmin and the cheap toilet paper.
Well, no, there's some generic brands which are just...
Listen, we all understand the princess and the pea situation. My wife is the princess. But maybe it'll hurt these companies enough that they'll go, I need to get on top of things just in case it happens again.
I don't think these companies care, man, anymore. I really think that's the downfall of what technology is doing. I mean, look at Walmart. Walmart's got a robot now that cleans the floors. It's going to be taking on other duties. It finally made it to Florence. If you go to Walmart and you'll stand around, you'll at a certain time in the evening, probably not during the coronavirus here because now they have limited hours, but after a certain time of the day, in came the robot. And we would interact with it for fun, like try and make blockades for it with a box of noodles or something and see how it reacts, because you're just trying to learn about what this thing does. And it starts kicking off an alarm and it will not move around you. It just waits for you to get the heck out of the way. And there's all sorts of things like that. But meanwhile, I asked the manager at the location I went to, so what is this going to do for the cleaning crew? They're being replaced.
Yeah.
And I
same
said,
thing with those registers up front that are self-checkouts.
And then
I refuse to use those. I want to use a person.
Their job? The Walmart that came over here and big provider of jobs for everybody, and Sam's, that's Sam's. No, that's another sin. You know why? You go into Sam's, you pay a fee to be a member. You go in there, you buy your stuff, you go around doing your grocery shopping, you wait in line at the register, you pay for everything, and then on the way out, they come and check every item.
Well, not really. Now they just scan an item.
Well,
because there's cameras everywhere.
Yes, but they were. Yeah, you know how many times, man? I told them at Sam's. I said, you know what? Get the heck out of my face, man.
A buddy of mine showed me an app that you can have on your phone where you can scan your own items with your phone. You don't have to stand in line when it's time to check out. You can check out with your phone.
Really?
And then walk up front and show them the code.
At Sam's?
He scans the code, he scans your items, and you're out the door. I've done that the last 2 times I've went.
At Sam's.
And I've spent 0 time checking anything out.
You're kidding.
I am not. It's awesome. It's just the Sam's Club app.
Did you meet like some alien visitor, like a gray, that told you this? Or what?
Nope.
I don't know, a lot of stores.
It was
Does
actually
it work for Walmart?
It was actually
Well, Walmart, you can order everything online. That's what my dad does. He never even goes into Walmart. He just orders everything online, and he tells them about an hour before he's going to
I
be there,
don't
and he
use
goes
that.
and picks it up.
And now, for a limited time, Wendy's delivers for free.
No, but Jan, the guy named Jan Vondroska, he's from the Czech Republic. He works with me at my place I work at. He was a hockey player, went around the world. Very interesting guy. I've had him on 2 podcasts so far, but he was telling me he's using the app. He's like, I walk in, I grab what I want.
That's cool. I'd like to meet him, man.
I use my phone, zoop, 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 and I'm out the door. Yeah, fascinating guy.
We almost went to war with them, Hungary.
Really?
Yeah, recent history.
He's a really fascinating guy. He talks about being under the Russian control and about how his father ran a restaurant and how his father was encouraged to be friendly to people but not too friendly, and there was always people watching him. And
it's a menace.
He's like, we had to, he's like, I learned to play hockey to get away from there. And I was good at it. And he said, thank God I was. He said, because I played for my country. And then I went and played for Italy.
You got pretty nice dentures? Did you have to go to Sexton's?
No.
Came here for the quality dentures? Because, there's no such
I don't
thing
know.
as
I don't know what his teeth situation is like.
Hockey players don't have their teeth.
He's got a nose that looks like it's been broken a few times.
But they don't have their teeth either. They're all
they fight.
He went to Italy. He went to Germany. He went to France, Canada, and then eventually to America to play hockey professionally.
That's cool.
And he was really good. And at one time, he had an injury, and so he came to Florence to play for the local PD Pride.
Yeah, I remember when that started.
While he was here, he met a girl, fell in love, and they had a kid and got married.
The black hole effect.
Yeah.
It affects all nationalities.
He ended up here, and then him and her didn't make it. They got divorced, and
he still can't leave.
He remarried, and he started working for Budweiser, and I think eventually came to work with us. And
the drinking helps you.
He's fantastic. He's awesome.
Yeah,
he's a really fascinating guy. But we often talk about how different it was, his life versus my life, where over there he was taught America's the enemy, and at any moment they could bomb us. And so he said in school we would have the bomb drills where we would go in the basement and put on gas masks, and it was our big fear. I said, I hope you understand how mind blowing it is that you were brought up that way, and then now you live here, and you're like, Next
time you talk to him,
like
ask him about the subways and the trains there. They have really good public transit systems, and you know what they do? You could tell the communist effect even after the Iron Curtain collapsed, Soviet Union dissipated, and suddenly nations that were formerly under the occupation and part of that empire were free again. But the remnants of it, in my travels in Czech and Hungary, I noticed it all through the Eastern Europe block, to traveling on like subways, the trains, when they come to the next stop, and they got great subway systems. Get anywhere you want for cheap in a minute in a big city like Budapest. And you can choose which way you want to go.
That's basically what his origination is now.
Yeah, so, but when they did that, the amazing thing is when you hear the announcer come up on the intercom for the next stop, that is the difference. It is like a klaxon, like a nuclear emergency alert. The voice is so invasive that it makes you cringe. And I started noticing riding on the trains and the buses there and on the trolleys, and diesel, electric trolleys, all sorts of different transports, under the river, above it, and all these different transports, all the same voice telling you where you're going next. And I started looking at the Hungarians, and I started seeing exactly what happened to them. Beat down to the point where when they're on that, they don't even hear that sound as invasive. It doesn't even bother them. Here in a free society, we don't have that kind of thing. It's just not like that.
Well, and the crazy part to me was him having to play for all these different countries. You'd have to learn a tertiary version of everybody's language in order to communicate.
Oh, absolutely.
So he's like, of course I did, and then he's lived here for so long now.
He speaks like 5-6 languages. Probably.
Yeah. And so I was like, I asked him one time. He's, I'm 40. I'll be 46 soon. I think he's 42 or 43.
Wow.
But he's like, he said, I think I asked him, I said, I'm kind of curious, when you sleep or when you dream or whatever, do you dream in a language or does it change, or are you aware of it? And he's like, I don't really know. I've never thought about it that way.
Well, I think you would. You do. You hear things in different languages.
Yeah. He's like, some of it is really, like, I can't describe it. He said, because I asked him on the first podcast, and he thought about it, and on the second podcast, he came back and he's like, there are parts where I'm speaking to my mother, and I know it's my original language. He goes, and there's parts where I'm speaking to my wife, and it's definitely English. He goes, but I don't my brain doesn't separate the two, and I think consciously about it. It's very nondescript.
Does he speak like my mom does, like in the sense that you see a lot of what I mean is like the grammar?
Little broken grammar.
But it's because they're thinking in another language's grammar, their home language
clear.
grammar, but they speak the other language, and the misapplication in language speaking, though they speak fluently, is using wordage that this is a type of sentence he wouldn't say.
But much more clear. I mean, he's had kids here, and he's been here long enough that it's. I guess he came here young enough that he was able to
sounds really cool.
Emulate a little bit more. But fascinating guy. But
those damn Czechs, though, I'm gonna tell you, that's like I'm just putting this in the book there. Like how the Hungarians almost went to war with them there, and it was the Hungarians' fault. I think it was pretty tense. The Danube River. The Czechs were trying to make a hydroelectric plant, I think, and to use some of the benefits of the Danube upriver into the Czech Republic, and.
Fighting over a water source?
Well, I mean, it's like the Hungarians wouldn't compromise on the issue, I think. And there's ships that go up the Danube. I mean, big ships. The bridges in Budapest, man, that accommodate those ships. Those are super tankers going on.
Travel and trade and all that other stuff.
All that stuff right up the Danube. Well, the Czechs finally got pushed into a point. I remember I was there, and I was shocked. When I arrived, man, the Danube was like gone. In Budapest, it was like so much lower. They were having to dredge out the river in places to fit vessels. And certain vessels couldn't go, and I got a relative there married to my cousin, who's the ship's captain. And it's like the Czechs did that. They finally went and made a dam. And I think they came to some kind of a resolution and stuff, but there was a time there where on the streets, I remember looking in the papers, that Hungary was actually considering
going to war,
military action over the dam. It's like, well, I don't think the Czechs were at fault. So don't get mad at me, sir. I'd hope to meet you sometime. But
well, I watched that. There's a Netflix short series called Spy with Sacha Baron Cohen, where it's about a relative of his. There was a conflict between Syria and Israel, and he basically was a spy who worked for the country over rights to their drinking water. Both countries were claiming rights to their local river that flowed in between them, and they were at war with each other over this water source. And he actually portrays a character who is a descendant of his. It's a very good show. It's really fascinating. I had no idea any of the history of it. I was like, wow, this is just so fascinating.
Is it like Fiji water, where every bottle you buy goes to sponsor someone holding a handgun to a local's head and not letting them get their water? So they could ship it out.
This was everything from irrigation to farming to their actual drinking water.
Oh, yeah.
They're in a desert, arid area, so this is water's life.
Yeah,
but it was fascinating. It was really done well. But yeah, we've done
Poland. Did you hear about Poland?
No.
They finally are entering the space program, and the first Polish astronauts independently from Poland just launched. And would have made it into orbit, but they ran out of coal.
So how about that? But that's the punchline. Hey, we've done about 2 hours. Probably need to wrap this up. People are probably getting bored by us.
Yeah.
I always worry about that. I'm like, who's still listening?
I think we had a pretty fun conversation.
Yeah.
It was chaotic and weird, man.
I like chaos and weird.
We didn't get you in the conversation so much. I'm so sorry. You gotta fight the power, man. And like when guys are talking around you.
Well, I like listening too,
Well, it's a smart woman, but.
Well, if you want to be on again next time, you can just
I got some information on ufology.
We can come up with some stuff when we get weird.
I worked for the Center for Paranormal Investigation and Study in Pittsburgh for quite a number of years. So.
Well, that's neat.
Oh, I wish I didn't have to pee right
now.
like
a 30-year...
she actually has this little detector she can bring in here, and she'll tell you...
EVP, I did,
what you got here, where. If you really want to know, and then you'll have to get a Catholic priest to come in here and exercise your house. Well, there's weight benches here and weight benches there.
Which actually, ironically, I got that job because of I was working taking care of nuns with the Catholic Church, and there was a boy who I dated for a couple weeks who was in a Christian rock band, and his best friend's girlfriend worked at the church, and through that I ended up getting this job working for taking care of nuns as a ghost hunter.
Neat.
Who are you going to call?
Ghostbusters.
I love the Dan Aykroyd interview where he talks about growing up in a house with mediums coming to his house on a regular basis, and he came up with the idea for Ghostbusters because of several interactions that they had with his father in this farmhouse, and they would contact this female spirit that lived in their house all the time. And he said, and I wrote.
Believe it.
He said, I wrote. He's like, I wrote the story of Ghostbusters based upon this.
The electronic,
just mentioned Dan Aykroyd,
electronic
just because we were
voice
talking
phenomenon.
the previous subject. Dan Aykroyd invests a huge amount of his time and money into aliens.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you, matter of fact, he owns a vodka company called Crystal Skull Vodka. Really cool. He did
Dan Aykroyd owns it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to start getting drunk with
He
Dan.
did. He did a.
That's a decent vodka.
I want to say he did a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan, and they talked about aliens, and he spat off knowledge one after another of things, and it wasn't like he was reading it from a thing. He knew everybody's names, occasions.
Now my dad would be the one for that.
He was on 42nd Avenue when he was producing, taping his 3rd episode in a series he was coming out with, and the guest that he had on, he went outside and was called by Britney Spears, who asked him on the phone while he was smoking a cigarette on 42nd. He tells the story, and he says, Brittany calls me, and I say, hello, and she says, hey, this is Brittany Spears. He says, hey, how you doing? And he notices a black sedan across the street, pull up. One-way street. Or I'm thinking it's one-way, east way street. But he said, he's talking to her, he's smoking a cigarette, and Brittany says, hey, well, I'm going to be on Saturday Night Live. Would you do a skit with me? Could you come on the show with me? And he says, yeah. And he looks this way, and he looks back, he takes a drag-off cigarette, and he sees this malevolent, super tall guy staring at him from across the street from this black sedan. And he's like looking at him, and he's filming a UFO show with these scientist guests or whoever on there, these experts, taking a smoke break. He looks away again. He says, yeah, well, I tell you what, I'm going back into the studio, and I'll call you later when I get out. We'll make plans, And he looks back over, and he says, the car is gone. The people are gone. He looked up the avenue, looked back, scared the living crap out of Dan Aykroyd. He says it was men in black. He went back up into the studio, and the studio fired him. They canceled the show because of what the guests were taping with the people on the show. And he was just fired from it, and he thinks that those men in black guys that guy stared at him that way, he said, there's no way, they vanished into thin air. I know what I saw.
I'll send you a link to the YouTube one. It's really fascinating because he rattles off all kinds of crazy facts that you're like, how does one guy know this much about the subject? But he's passionate about it, and he's in deep. He's in all the way.
Europeans have shots of liquor every now and then at the table, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so, kids can have a drink if they want. They'll let the kid have a little drink. 10 years old, you want to have a glass of wine? Go ahead at dinner. Oh, yeah. They'll let the kid have a glass of wine. But it makes you wonder, what did they put in Dan Aykroyd's drink when he was a kid?
He grew up in this house where they did this all the time. I mean, his father was a ghost hunter.
That's cool. I mean,
they believe they had mediums come over on a regular basis and exercise.
I don't believe in ghosts.
It's crazy. I believe in ghosts.
I do. My grandmother's house is totally.
I've got a great ghost story.
I don't know how ghosts fit in with Christianity.
EVP, some of the stuff that
I'm not exactly sure.
I gotta pee. Let's end this up. Yeah. Hey, everybody, thank you for listening. We'll do more next time. Thank you, Ron and Desiree, for being on.
Very cool.
Please remember to rate, review, subscribe. Check out the website, www.stuffiheard.com. And as always, cue the cow.